we will talk about distress paint. And distress paint, as I mentioned, one of my kind of go-to mediums for different things. And I always want to preface that when it comes to paints, I'll talk about this tin in a second. When it comes to paint, let's actually pick out peeled paint. No, this is forest moss. We'll do peeled paint. All right, so distress paint. In the world of art mediums, it's really important as a maker to choose the medium that is best for you. Choose what you like, choose what works the way you want, and choose a medium based on the kind of makes you do. Not every medium is going to work for the kind of medium you want to do, and especially when it comes to paint. And I mentioned Dina Wakely, amazing painter. She knows color like nobody's business. She can take a brush and make magic with a single stroke. And then you have Diane, who works with paint in a completely different way, in an art journal format and quick backgrounds that you can write on and things like that. Distress paint, well, in my world, it's something that's going to distress. It's going to have water reactive properties that do unique things. And distress paints work with everything else in the distress line. You can use it with embossing glaze, you can use it with crayons, you can use it with ink, with oxide, with stains. And throughout this demo, hopefully I'm going to be able to share how I like to incorporate paint. So throughout this, I know it's a Q&A. I'll try to follow the chat, but if it's like, how does this differ than this? Or how is this paint different than this? I can only say, try it. Really, that's all I can suggest. So here's the concept behind distress paint. Distress paint is a water-based acrylic paint. It is very fluid, okay? It actually has a mixing ball in there because it is fluid. So if you think about viscosity, it's not a thick paint that you're gonna squeeze out of a tube. It is a thin viscosity paint. And honestly, these paints actually have different viscosities than one another. They're all fluid, but some are a little more fluid than others depending on the color, because there's certain colors that I want it to be a little bit more fluid than others. Not much, right? It's not like it's going to become a gouache or anything really, really fluid, but just the whole idea when it comes to paint is that you want it to flow. Now, the unique thing about this over any other distress medium that we've covered is that distress paint is a water reactive paint, but it is the only distress product that is permanent and waterproof when dry, okay? So when distress paint goes on a substrate, be that metal, paper, wood, fabric, it is going to be water reactive when it's wet, but as soon as it dries, it becomes permanent, meaning it will not re-wet. So it doesn't require sealing, it doesn't require any of that. It is permanent, and we're going to use that to our benefit for a lot of techniques, and that's what is important to understand about this particular medium. It's really cool in the fact that it does dry waterproof and permanent, and it allows us to kind of mix and match the other colors. Now, distress paint is different than other Ranger paints. Ranger has had Adirondack paint in their line. They've had their own brand of acrylic paint. This is none of those. This is its own formulation. Now, distress paint was originally launched in a dabber, right? A dabber top. And this dabber top has that little sponge foam. And quite honestly, when I first started out with paints, I was good with the dabber because all I was really using distress paint for was pretty much painting on stamps or stamping with it or doing things. And as with anything, the more you use a medium, the more you kind of discover the ways that you would use it more than any other. And I found that the dabber was very inconvenient. I found that I was constantly unscrewing the dabber to pour some paint down or dabbing a bunch of paint. And it's like, you know what, Ranger, I really kind of outgrown the dabber. I don't really want the dabber. And so I don't know how many years back, but we switched over to a flip top. Okay, and a flip top, it just flips up and it's got this little spout. You can see those little crusties of paint fly off because this paint, unlike a regular acrylic paint that has a flat top, this has a little spout on it and a plug that's in the lid. So when this closes, it's going to create an airtight seal in the paint. Now, depending on what paints you have, so let's say you have the dabbers, right, before the flip top, it is the same paint. And unlike the sprays that we talked about last week, this is the exact same bottle. So if you have dabbers, you can buy replacement flip tops if you wanted to switch yours over to flip tops. You can buy them, I think, in a 3-pack. You can even buy them in bulk packs. At certain places, they sell maybe like 25 in a pack. Same thing if you only have flip tops and there's a color where you're like, hey, I wish I had a dabber because I only use black paint on foam stamps, or I only use, you know, antique linen to do the edges of, say, a junk journal. You can buy replacement dabbers and you can take off your flip top and you can put on the dabber. So you can kind of mix and match. If you do have dabbers and let's say you're going to switch it out and you're not going to use it, I do recommend washing these. It has a little bit of a foam on it. It's a spring-loaded dabber. So you could rinse this out if you're not going to be using it. Otherwise, the paint will eventually dry up there and just make the flow a little bit more challenging, if you will. All right. So we'll talk about storage. Now, right now, there is not a storage tin dedicated to paint. And I said right now, because we are working on a tin that will work for not only paint, but also the distress re-inkers that a lot of people ask about, those glass bottles. There is a tin in the works that will actually do either or, which is what's taking so long because because the height is very similar, I wanted as a maker that you would be able to use it for either or instead of having just different tin configurations. So what I've done, if you have paints and you want to take a set with you or you need to travel or take them, I've just taken the Distress ink pad tin, right? That's the one that comes with this little tray insert. I pull out the insert, and to pull out the insert, if you grab from the inside and you kind of squeeze these together, see this is like a clear plastic, you can get this to kind of buckle in a little bit and pop it out. And that is how I put my paints. Now again, you don't have to store them this way, it's completely up to you, but that's how I have mine just for the sake of the demo. Or again, if I just want some paints and I want it convenient, this tin really works for me. Labels, again, you can go to Ranger's website, rangerink.com, scroll to the bottom of the page where it says organize your products. You can click on paint. This is a 3/4 inch circle punch. You simply print it out on either cardstock or sticker paper, punch, peel, stick, and off you go. All right, so that's what we're going to work on. Let me get this little tray out of the way. We're just gonna take some different paints out. I'm gonna see if I can just, there we go. I'll set this off to the side. Hopefully I can see some of the colors that I'll just grab a few here and there. And we'll go through everything from metallics to whatever I kind of feel like. Just depends on my mood, right? Okay, so the paint, as I mentioned, fluid. So you want to shake this up. You want to get that mixed up. How you store it? Well, totally up to you. If you have it in the tin, you can leave it upright. You can store it on its side. It doesn't really matter because regardless of how you store it, you're going to need to shake it up. And unlike a spray, it does not separate. It's not going to have pigment and then fluid here. So this is really just about mixing it up, just like you would stir a can of house paint, right? No different that we want to mix this simply because, again, it's viscosity, it's fluid. Now, when I work with paint, you can work on whatever substrates you want to work on. As I mentioned, it works on metal and plastic and glass and fabric and cardboard and chipboard and paper and wood. Really, anything that you want to put it on, you can use this acrylic paint. I'm going to just do different techniques on different substrates and I'll talk about that. It doesn't mean it's the only substrate it works on. It just means that that's what I kind of feel like doing in the moment. We are going to take advantage, excuse me, of working on the nonstick mat because I want to work on this silicone mat just for some certain techniques as far as getting those paints to move like we did for ink. So here we go. I'll start with just, well, tags because I like tags. We're going to need some water because it's going to be really important that this is reactive with water. And you can let the paint dry on its own if you want. This is, as I mentioned, this is going to be a water reactive paint that's going to just dry on its own, or you can use a heat tool to dry it, right? Heat tool, hair dryer. If you're in a hurry, you can get this to dry on its own. So the first thing is just to understand its property. And its property, as I mentioned, is going to be water reactive. So let's go back to peeled paint. It's because it's one of my faves for this. I'm going to shake it up. Flip top, there's a little notch right there. I'm just going to flip that up. And I say it's a spring top, but it really isn't. I mean, Ranger doesn't like me to call it a spring top, but however this little plastic thing is designed, you can see that it keeps the top open. I like that because it will allow me full control over the paint. And here's what I mean. So when I flip this over, I don't just get a pour of paint coming out. I'm going to squeeze the bottle, and that's going to allow me to place a drop of paint down or several drips. And you'll see in some of the techniques the importance of kind of controlling the drips, if you will, all right? But for now, it's just about understanding the properties of this. So I'm just going to take my finger and just put some paint on this tag. It's just wet paint, okay? There we go. Now, if I wet this, just spray it with water, watch what happens to our paint. There we are. You see that wicking? Now, again, if you've been following this series, you know when I talk about wicking what that means, and that is distress is designed to move away from itself. That color is designed to wick, and that is to go away. And by wicking, That's what's going to allow us to do some really cool blends with paint. It's that water reactiveness. Obviously acrylic paints, or anything water-based for that matter, if you use something water-based, you do get the ability to control how this blends, if you will. But I like the idea of having a water reactive paint that's going to give me this wicking movement. Because of that, we're going to be able to mix and match different colors. So let's take this same tag. We're going to just put a few drops of paint on our mat. You can just click those down really, really quick. So when you shake it up, you just give it a couple of shakes and off you go, all right? And you'll see really why I love flip tops. I just love the idea that I can just flip this open and add a drop or two of some color. And I think I'm going to take a little brown. Why not? This one's almost empty. This is my walnut stain. I love walnut stain. I love frayed burlap. I love all that. But I'm going to throw in just a little bit of brown, not much. And I'm even going to put in some crackling campfire. We'll do some grungy colors. We'll also do some bright colors. I'm just going to throw in a little drip of that. So if you noticed, as I was dripping, different viscosity. Crackling campfire, a little thinner. Walnut stain, a little thicker. Certain colors, certain dark colors, because we wanted to be as close to the Distress ink palette as possible. It's important that the color, to me, for the chemist, was really vital to match. And that is why the viscosity is different throughout it. And I'm totally okay with that. So as we know from previous demos, working on wet or dry surfaces, paint's no different. Meaning, if I start on dry paper, my paint is going to want to grab into the substrate. If I start on wet paper, that's going to allow my paints to move on contact. It's the same thing. So I'm just going to wet this again. I'll take advantage of this right now. It's not dry, so I'll be able to just go in. I want to wet my paint, so I'm just going to spray some drops of water. You'll see down here, you don't get much movement, but we will when we start swiping through this. And what I really like about the paint is it almost takes on, I always call it like a marbling property. And that is, look at those colors that I was able to drag through. You would think that all those colors would mix together because I swiped through it a couple of times, when in fact they kind of sit on top of each other and get this really cool marbly look. Now, as long as this paint is wet, we can react it, meaning we can continue to spray it with water, we can move it, right? We can get that color to drip. Because it is acrylic paint and not ink, we're going to get different levels of where that paint is thicker, and you'll see in that color here, that deeper color. And we're also going to see where that paint starts to thin out, different lighter shades. So water is really important in the blend fact. And you're going to figure out like how much paint you want to put on your mat, depending on your background. Let's say we want to blend out this area. You can go in and just drip some water direct, move that, and just let that move around. All right. Okay. So where is my, I was going to say, I need my towel because this, it gets pretty juicy. I don't mind that. So as far as your background goes, here are some options. If you allow your backgrounds to air dry, you're going to get that continued wicking or marbling until it dries. And that is my preference. I kind of learned that trick from Dina, again, about letting paint air dry versus heat dry. She likes to work on stuff and set it aside to dry. And I was like, how do you wait? And she's like, yeah, but the paint just does cool things when you come back to it. And she's totally right. So if you have that creative freedom of time, you can do some tags like this or backgrounds and set them aside to dry. You're going to get more movement. However, you do have the ability to dry this. And I love the fact that when you're working with acrylic paints, some acrylic paints, they want to blister, they want to bubble, they want to do all of those things. This does not do that because these paints don't have any fillers. It's always challenging. I mean, that's why I like to do Distress paint as its own demo, because this is like a paint that thinks it's an ink, okay? Because it does those kind of cool things that inks do, but we're getting serious intensity, full opacity, okay? It is a pigment, so it doesn't have any dye in it. So your colors are completely opaque. One is going to cover the next. But I love the fact that as I'm going in, let me grab a paper towel, because remember on the edges of our surfaces, remember from the videos, if it looks like sludge, it dries like sludge. So that little border of green, before that dries, I want to go in and take that off. I can still go in with ink and do all sorts of things with this, but I'm just going to dry this. And again, only using a heat tool simply for the fact that it's a demo and I want to go in and dry this. All right, that's dry enough for me to show because I want to get into some more backgrounds before I move on to the next technique. But you get the idea of how cool this background is. Now, as I mentioned, the benefit of this background is going to be completely permanent, waterproof, which means if I put stain over it, it's not going to re-wet this. If I blend over it, it's not going to re-wet this. If I add another layer, it's not going to re-wet this, because once the paint is dry, it is permanent, it is waterproof, and it has to be completely dry. So this wet area, if I wet it right now, it's going to continue to move. But once the entire surface is dry, it's going to be permanent. So I'm going to set this aside just for right now. I think I'll put this over here. And we'll talk just a little bit about the mat. You can see here on the mat, and I don't want to zoom in right now because I still want to do some other backgrounds and I don't want to go in and out. But you can see the brown and the blue. You can see the orange and the green. Even though we swipe through it, the paint maintains its integrity. Now that doesn't mean that you can't mix paint, okay? I don't want you to think like, oh, it's, you know, like oil and vinegar and they're not going to mix. That's not true. You can still mix colors, you can do all the things that you want to do. But when you're creating backgrounds, this paint was designed to maintain its integrity on the surface, right? So let's just wipe this up. And again, I'm cleaning on the mat. Could I go in with something else? Yes. Would I normally? Yes. But just again, for the sake of the demo, I always like to show different color palettes, because this is another thing, especially when it comes to distressed paint, because it is all pigment, the vibrancy that you're going to get in this is quite stunning. So we're going to take some picked raspberry. We're going to take a little kitsch flamingo, a couple of drips of that. We'll take some mustard seed. That's going to be really bright. That's a really bright yellow. All right, let's take some other things. Let's take some twisted citron. That's going to be a nice vivid, and you can kind of feel, you'll see when I just how I hold the bottles. I shake them up and I just kind of feel for that little indentation, so I know right where my thumb needs to go. So as we're doing this, a couple of things to keep in mind. If you wanted to go back and add a layer, so let's just say after the fact you created some backgrounds and you want to put something on top, more paint, you can, but it will cover what you put over the top, right? If your background was dry. Now we're going to go in. Okay, we're going to spray that with water. So this time I'm going to start with just a dry surface. Now I'm working on mixed media heavy stock. The distress tags, these guys that I use in my videos, this is the same as, let me see if I have a pack of it. There we go. The mixed media heavy stock. And this is the mixed media heavy stock that, there we go, comes in this 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 as well as 8 1/2 by 11. So all that paper is the same. So when you see these tags and why they're called distress tags, it's because it's that same paper. So I know how it's going to react. But this time I'm going to go dry, but my paint is wet. You can see I've sprayed it with water. And what you're going to notice is that the color is going to grab different because we're on a dry surface. And I show you this because remember, there's no right or wrong to do this. Okay, so we've got just a couple of swipes. But again, take a look at the mat. You can see that the color maintains its integrity. So you could get another print. You could do all sorts of things with this. But for now, I'm going to go in and wet this. Add some water, just get some movement. And that's where that kind of marbling begins, right? And you get to control it. I mean, you'll notice that you can either miss that or you can just go in with like drips of water. See, if you want to get that paint to move, you can hit it with just a drip. Look at that. And once you're happy with that movement, just be done, right? Set it aside, let it air dry, let it do its thing. Let's go in for another background. This background, I think I'll take some watercolor cardstock. Let's see what we get. We're just going to spray this one. This one might be a little bit muddier, but I think I'm going to be okay with that. There we go. Just going to kind of just hit the bottom of that with some water. Look at that. Beautiful. Love how that paint just creates totally new colors in there. I love that this could be a stamped background. This could create kind of a sunset. It could be underwater. There's just like, that's just done from a print. There was no brushes involved. There was no nothing. And that's the thing. I will say that paint is a little less forgiving than ink, right? Ink, we can continue to build and move all sorts of backgrounds. Paint, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Don't overwork this, right? Let it just do what it's going to do, and you can still work on top of it, but just don't go don't go overboard with your paint because you're just going to keep covering it up, right? Inks, remember, we can build because they have that translucent impact that we can really utilize what's in the background to start showing through. Paint, because it's completely opaque, you swipe it through, it's going to cover up whatever was there. So that's why you get what you get. Could you do another one? Sure. You could just keep going until you're not happy with it. So you get the idea. Now let's just show just another background. Look at this one. See how this one is just kind of doing its own thing? Completely different than when we first work with it. Like the colors start to pool up. It almost creates cells, if you will, but it doesn't. I mean, I don't want you to think that it's like paint pouring, but it has some really cool properties if you just let it do its thing. All right, I'm gonna take off that. See the little drippage? I'll take that off. All right. Yeah, you'll see that really like many mediums, if you can just get in the zone, that compartmental thinking, and just sit there and go, okay, I'm just gonna work with paint today and let it just do its thing. Great. All right, I'm gonna set this one there because again, it's still a little drippy. Look at this one. This one's great. Look at that one. See how it's starting to kind of break on the edges because of that water reactive property. That is what you need to remember about distress paint. Water reactive. So they're going to do some pretty wild things. All right, let me set this over here. I got a little paint everywhere. We'll set this here. Okay, we're gonna do one more print and then we'll move on to another technique. This one, I'm gonna go into something just a little dreamier. So this is gonna be some speckled egg. We'll take some evergreen bough. Okay, and let's see, we'll take a little, here we go. I'm gonna take a little walnut stain. Okay, so for this one, this is one of those demos. There we go. I'll put this over on the top. Okay, this is one of those demos that if you have some area for things to dry, better on you. Better, better, better. All right, so here's what we're going to do on this one. I'm just trying to find a color that I want to use. I'll go in with this one. So instead of adding water to this, we're going to take some spray stain. Now keep in mind that we're now introducing a dye, a translucent dye. So that dye is going to impact our colors, but it's going to be pretty cool. All right, so I'm just going to add some spray stain. Okay, and the spray stain is what's going to give us that fluid movement initially on our background. I'm going to take a tag or piece of paper, spray with a little bit of water because I want that stain to react. And the whole idea about this series, if you've been watching each week, is that remember what we learned last week, you implement that this week. That's really, really important to kind of build onto that. So with that wet surface, I'm just going to start going through this mix. And this mix, what's interesting, it's going to just do something different, right? So instead of getting a full striation of just paint, we're also playing with that ink. Okay, so we're going to start moving this color around, especially that brown right there. Okay, I just want to really break that up. And I'm not worried about that because as long as this is wet, there we go, it's going to start doing some movement, right? So now I'm just going to start playing around with the texture of this background. So on my media mat, I'm just pressing down in certain areas, and that's lifting or breaking up some of this color, right? So you can see that kind of, that's the frayed burlap spray that's going across, but we can also see the intensity of our paint. I'm going to just drip that because I want some more movement. And that's what you're going to kind of discover when you're playing around with paint is while this is wet, that becomes all that kind of cool movement. This stuff right here, man, if you're sitting here and you've got just a pile of backgrounds, like let's just take, we can take more watercolor paper. We can still just go in and just see about picking this up. So if you're an art journaler, this is really great because you can pick up some color from your glass just to create a background. Love this. I'm gonna pick up some of this too. I want some of that grunge. All right, look at that. Yep, that's a good one. All right, I'm gonna set that one aside. So let me dry this layer and we're gonna go back into the paint. So by introducing a color of ink or stain, and this could be an oxide, if you didn't want to use spray stain, you could go in with oxide. The only thing to keep in mind with oxide, remember, oxide is definitely a kind of that mixture of dye and pigment. So I don't really use a lot of oxide with my paint because if you do that, you kind of end up with too much pigment. And to me, I don't really notice the difference that I get here. Okay, so don't freak your freak about this. This is only a layer because I want to show you about layering. All these other backgrounds that we've done so far, we've just kind of put the paint on, sprayed it, and you're done, right? But this is going to be about layering. Can we layer our backgrounds? Absolutely. So we've dried our first layer, not crispy dry, but dry enough. I'm gonna go back and spray this. Now I'm gonna take this kind of empty area and I'm gonna go into this paint area. So look at that, right? I'll dry this. All right. And again, just drying your layers. Now, once this layer is dry, it's not going to react anymore. And that to me is kind of the benefit of starting a foundation with paint, especially if you want to layer things over the top. And I'll show you what I mean by that. Okay, just going to go in a little bit here. Let's just take a little bit of that, a little bit of brown in that area. So you wanted to kind of grunge that up, take a little spot there. All right, so now I'm just going to, again, when you're cleaning, you're going to work from the mat off the edge, not the other way around. Perfect. And we'll dry this. Okay. Perfect. I appreciate the comments. This is only like technique one. This is kind of the most basic thing for paint, but this is what I find the most fascinating, especially if you've never worked with distress paint, because if you've only been an inker, you know, you've only worked with ink pads or spray stains, you're so used to the reactiveness that every time you put something on it, you're going to get another reactive layer. That paint is very, very different because once it's dry, it's done. And it gives you a lot more, I think, versatility and flexibility of introducing other art mediums, and whether that's crayons or sprays or ink pads or anything. All right, I just want to kind of lift off some of those edges because see, I like getting that little lighter edge when that beads up there. Okay, so now we have a background. I'm just going to make sure it's dry. How do you know if it's dry? If you touch it and it's not wet, then it's dry. You're welcome. Yeah, that's how you know. You just touch it. But it's very cool because, again, look at that background, right? I'll hold this up. All those drips, everything that we would normally get with an ink, we can achieve with a paint. But this medium, of course, is going to be permanent. So you would expect this to start wicking and blending and doing all that, and it's not going to do that because it is paint, which means we can still go in and add colors, okay? I was just spraying water just for the sake of spraying it with water, right? Just to show you that when I go and lift this, the paint is still there, right? So remember, if you were to do this with water and ink and you blot this off, all the color would come off with it. It doesn't do that with paint because this is permanent. So that means, could I go in and add some ink? Absolutely. I could still go in. This happens to be some weathered wood, and I can add some weathered wood into this background. Just wanted to splatter it. Drip this with a little bit of water, right? Just because I want to get a different effect. So now that weathered wood is just weathered wood. It's not taking on that brown because that brown is paint. That brown is permanent. So I'm just going to go in and dry this layer. Pretty cool. When you start thinking about it, you just really get the idea of, man, I can use my stuff together. Or maybe you're thinking, man, I don't use this at all. That's what I hope these demos inspire you to do, is just use your stuff. Really get over that fear factor of, what if I make a mistake? What if I make a mess? What if I get this on my hands? Wonderful. Wonderful. That means you had some creative time. After all, that's why we are makers. Now, if you notice what I was doing real quick is I was spraying some water because I wanted to show you that I still get my inks to react over the paint the way they would react over paper. But I'm getting a different level because I'm able to bring out that underneath layer. So let me just take some of this off with my paper towel, right? And you can see that paper towel is lifting what color? What color, Mario? Right, weathered wood. Yeah, you notice that it lifted weathered wood. It did not lift brown. Why? Because the brown is paint, which means the paint is permanent. So when you were doing this lifting, it's only lifting your ink. So that is just that reminder that, can you use inks, whether that's an ink pad with a blending tool or whether that's your stain, can you use it over paint? Yes, you can, right? But just know that when you add water and lift, all you're going to lift is your ink, because inks will always be water reactive, but paints are permanent when dry. And if you remember that, oh, the rest of this demo is just going to be like, I got this. All right. So we'll review these at the end. We'll still look in, how they're kind of drying and doing their own thing, but I'll just set this aside. We're going to go into some other techniques and utilize what we just learned in the basics to our advantage. All right. I'm going to move this stuff off to the side. Now, when it comes to cleanup, and I'm just going to talk about it now because I don't want to talk about cleanup at the end. I'm a clean as you go guy. You've noticed in the demos that you'll see me spray a lot of water. I've got a pack of baby wipes off to the side that, you can just take out a baby wipe. And while this is wet, it's very easy to clean because it is a water-based medium. So while it's wet, it cleans up with water. However, once the paint dries, I've got air bubbles from peeling that up. I'm just going to squeegee out those bubbles. There we go. Once this dries, so let's say it dried on your mat, or let's just say it even dried on a brush. If you take hand sanitizer and you put it onto that dry, crusty paint that you don't want, it will dissolve that paint and allow you to clean it up, right? Can you scrape this off with a razor blade? You can, right? As long as it's a straight edge and you go across, you can do that. But really, hand sanitizer will take it off of a mat, a table, a paintbrush, just something where you don't want dried medium. And the same rule applies if you have collage medium or any other dry. Try hand sanitizer. It will kind of break down that product and allow you to clean it up. Okay, so next we're going to work with stamps and paint. Now I will tell you that if you're going to work with stamps and paint, one of the things you need to keep in mind is that these paints are permanent when dry. So does that mean if I put it on my stamp, it's going to ruin it? Well, if you don't clean it, yeah. Or then you have to clean your stamp with hand sanitizer? Yeah, you could do that too. So the idea is when you're stamping with it, you want to make sure that you're cleaning this off while it's wet. So I'm just going to take a stamp. We're going to do a background stamp. Let me get, we'll take a big background block here. These are some favorites. These are Stampers Anonymous classics. If you've been an old school Stampers Anonymous fan, Stampers Anonymous originally was, the whole entire brand was developed by artists that remained anonymous, if you will. They were just artists that the original owner of the company licensed art and they just became Stampers Anonymous. But of course, through that, different artists have claimed their art, which is wonderful. And so usually the sets are a collaboration of different artists on there. And I love the classics. This is really this brand is what got me into stamping a bazillion years ago, because I absolutely love the look, the backgrounds. One of my favorites, you can just tell on here, Michelle Ward created these kind of blueprint lines. Dragonfly Legend will always be, I think, my favorite. And you can see how loved this stamp is. Freaking brilliant. She's amazing. Anyway, all right. So I'm going to take this kind of text stamp. And again, these are under classic. So this is not part of the Tim Holtz collection. But it is part of Stampers Anonymous. So if you want to check them out, you can. When it comes to a stamp, you have options, right? You can spread out your paint and you can dip a stamp into it. Personally, not my favorite way to go, because you're going to get paint everywhere. It's going to fill up the wells and details of your stamp. So that's where a brayer comes in. And this is why I was talking about my love for the Distress Brayer, because it is that soft rubber designed for distress mediums. So that's what we're going to use to stamp. I'll take another tag and work on that. And my stamp is fairly clean, but just to make sure it's clean, I'm just going to spray it with a little bit of water just to see what's on there. Because if something's going to come off with water, something is going to transfer. Look at that, clean. Water, white paper towel. Just goes to show you that you do not need to scrub your stamps. In fact, I just don't like my stamps scrubbed. I love them seasoned, whether they're rubber stamps or clear stamps, because they just work better. That is my opinion. Let me take some picket fence. This is just a white paint, but you could do picket fence, you could do antique linen, you could do pink, you could do kitsch flamingo, really whatever you want that to be. And I'm going to put some paint right here on the mat. Now, again, because I'm going to roll a brayer through it, it's just easier if you get the paint as wide as the brayer, so you're not spending time rolling out that little blob of paint. It's just easier to kind of coat your brayer. And we're just going to roll this across, right? Now, when you want to pick stuff up with your brayer, remember, let the brayer spin. You might even hear like that little squeaky wheel. We want that to move. It's just spinning on these little rods right here, right? We want that. That's what I like about this brayer. I love that, I don't know, that really kind of relaxed flow of this. And I'm just going to roll this across my stamp. And how do you know if you have paint on your stamp? Well, look at it. If you see it, it's there. And if you don't, it's not. So, well, you know what I mean. Like, I just mean that, like, you have to see, if you can see the paint, then it's there. And if you can't see the paint, especially if it's, you know, a color paint, because it's opaque, then you don't have enough paint on your stamp. And I just kind of roll in different directions to make sure that I'm kind of catching it. Now I'm going to flip this over on its feet, so my paint is not going to dry or anything like that. And I'll stamp this. And when I stamp, pretty much stamp with purpose, right? Just want to give it some nice pressure, lift this off. Then I'll go in, see, the paint came off the stamp, so that's good. Just going to pick more of this up. I don't need as much on this second one because this one's going to be kind of a second generation. But I love how the paint comes off of this rubber brayer with ease. And now I'll go in and we'll stamp this direction. Now, obviously, the more paint, and I'll try to hold this up so you guys can see that it is, in fact, there we go. It's going to kind of catch the light. I like my resist to be subtle. So when I do resist technique, I prefer it to be subtle. So that's why I don't use a lot of paint. If you wanted your resist to be intense, my advice is maybe try a different technique. Maybe use an embossed resist technique or resist spray or something like that. I just like that's why I'm showing you a paint resist, because every resist technique, so to clean the brayer, I'm just going to grab the brayer. These handles just easily separate. So now I can just remove the roller and just quickly wipe it up that way. This way I don't have to just keep rolling and rolling through something for no reason. I'll even dry this off with a paper towel. Put it back in the handle. Again, you just put one of the pegs in one end, and the handle is designed to spring this out. This isn't everyone's favorite brayer. This is just the style that I like, because I love to be able to clean it. I love the feet, and I love the fact that these handles just pull apart with ease, right? So again, baby wipe. So now, just like that, my stamp is clean, my brayer is clean, my surface is clean. Seconds to do that. So if you just clean as you go, makes it really easy. So we want this to be dry. Can you touch it? Sure, you can touch it. I'm just going to dry it with a heat tool just to make sure that it's dry. Love to dry. There we go. So next we're going to add the resist. And here's what you need to understand when it comes to resisting. We need opposite mediums to resist, right? Paint is not going to resist paint because it works together. The same way a distress ink pad can't resist a distress ink pad because it's the same. So we need different mediums. And so what's going to resist against this waterproof paint? Well, inks will, and that could be an ink pad, right? We could go in with a distress ink pad, or it could be spray stain. I think that fluid mediums just have, I don't know, a different effect, but I'll show you both real quick on the same tag, but I'll probably end up with sprays more than anything. So I'm just going to take a blending tool. Now you can use the regular foam, you can do the domed foam, but if I go in and I just start blending over here, you're going to see that as I add that ink, and I'm just staying in the same area just so you can see what I'm talking about, there's my resist. Can you see that? There we go. Right? It's showing up. It's coming through. So we could do this entire tag, but this is what I mean by a paint resist. It is supposed to be almost ghost-like, very subtle in the background. And it's important to understand that so you don't, like, you need realistic expectations when it comes to different mediums, right? Some people, when they do resist, they want it to be super bright and vibrant. Great. And embossed resist then is definitely your way to go on this, right? So what I'm going to do, just take this real quick. I'm just going to grab my splat box just because I don't want to get stain everywhere. I'll place this in there, spray a little bit of water because my paint is dry. So now I'm just going to add some different spray stains, some frayed burlap, there's some weathered wood. Again, just some different colors. This one, well, I'll go for it. This one's ground espresso. Whew, look at that. That's pretty intense. That's all right. I'm good with that. So I've added some stain to this, and now I'm just going to go in with some water, move it around. Okay. And get this out of the way. And let's go in and dry this. So usually when it comes to this technique and you're spraying, you start to freak your freak a little bit because you're like, whoa, where did everything go? Where did everything go? What happened? Don't worry about it. You're okay. Just keep it going. Just patience. Watch what's happening. Okay? As this is drying, this is when it's starting to appear. You see it? Okay. So when you're spraying, don't go in there and panic and just blot it all off with a paper towel. Let it dry. Let it do its thing. Trust the process. It is going to work. All right, there we go. See, it's like a Polaroid picture just developing, isn't it? Like, whoa. But I know, and that's why I like to tell you, because, you know, first time I learned the technique, I swiped it through and I'm like, okay, that didn't work because I didn't see anything. And then I just threw it in the trash, and then you go back later and you're like, wait a minute, what happened? All right, this was there. So I'm just gonna add some water, again, because my inks are always gonna be reactive, but my paint, no matter how much water, and that's why I love to show it with spray stain, because the fact that my paint doesn't do anything, it's pretty great. Now, here's what you need to keep in mind about a background. When you start adding things to it, you are impacting what it is, right? Does that make sense? Meaning, when I first dried it, you saw that it was picture perfect, but then you started adding other bits of contrast, and that means your eye wants to see it all the same. When it was all just ink and the paint, you were able to distinguish the specific image. So that being said, if you want to add layers and stencils and things like that, that's fine. Just don't overdo it. If you happen to, let's just say this, you put too much of something on there or you're not really happy with it, that's okay, because the paint will always resist ink, no matter how many times you go over the top of it, right? So it doesn't mean, like, if you've ever done resist, say with Versamark, right? You kind of, like Versamark on glossy paper, you put that on, and once you do it, it's done. Meaning if you try to do it again, the Versamark is kind of evaporated by then. But not with paint. We can always go back and add more spray. We can add more ink. We can cover all that up again. And the paint will always, always resist. Why is that? Because the paint is permanent. So here we go. We're just going to add some more of that color on there. I did a little blending. I did a little more stain, and we're going to dry it again. And it's important to understand that, because if you're in your space and you're like, what if I did this? You should be doing it. It's just a piece of paper. That is how you learn. That's how you build that creative confidence of saying, oh gosh, I added those splatters. I hate it. What happens if I ink it? Just do it. Just ink it. So see, there it comes back again. Just picture perfect. So when you first had those splatters and it was like, yeah, a little too busy. Okay, great. Now we added more ink. And I'm blotting this up because, see, if you blot it up, I'm going to get that little drippage mark. Look at that. That little scribbly dribbly right there. I love it. Because that is what I think kind of creates those elements of a background. Now, does that mean that we can't go in and add other things? No, we totally can. Just maybe I'll cover with my hand so I can add some water over here and just do some more creative editing, right? Add some drips. So there you go. Your hand is a perfect mask for that. And now we're able to still get those water drops through our ink, but just not so much where it covered up all of that. Now, here's what we've got. So right now we have done our resist, beautiful, under an ink layer. Let's say though that you want this to be brighter. You actually want this to be a little more intense. Right now, the ink is, believe it or not, sitting on top of that paint. Okay, it can go over the top. The same way in this last technique, the ink sat on top of the paint, right? So inks will sit on top. Although we call it a resist, it is resisting in somewhat, but you could leave it like this. But if you want that color to be a little bit more vibrant, intense, punchy, whatever you want to call it, take a little bit of water. It could be on a paper towel, it could be a baby wipe. And we're going to wipe over this. And what that's going to do is that's just going to remove the small amount of ink that is sitting on top of the paint, right? I'm not taking like a wet cloth over it. It's just slightly damp. But see how it's lifting that little bit of ink? And you'll see that my background, you're going to get, see that? See how much brighter that is? You're really bringing up that background. No right or wrong. So you don't have to, it's not going to come off just by touching if you don't wipe it off. It's only coming off with water because inks react with water. So the only way that would come off if you didn't wipe it would of course be if you lick it. And I always say don't lick your artwork. Okay, so with that, can we stamp on this? Sure. Well, what if we want to stamp on this? Knowing what we just learned about the fact that distress ink or oxide or spray stain is going to resist the paint. Well, what if we want to stamp on paint then? How does that work? Well, there's a different ink that we would need to do that. And that ink is going to be archival ink. Now Ranger makes a lot of different archivals. This is Distress Archival. The only significance of it being Distress is that this is archival ink in Distress colors. So formulation wise, between Ranger's Archival and Distress Archival, exactly the same. It's just Distress Archival is about the palette, the color palette. So I'm just going to take Black Soot. It's just a black archival ink. Archival is an oil-based waterproof ink. Right? We've talked about water-based, oil-based, and oil and water don't mix. So by stamping in an oil-based ink, it's going to make sure that my image stays on the top where it wants to be. Okay, so let's go in. Let's stick this back down. Let's take, yeah, this guy. Okay. All right, so let me see. Is that gonna fit there? No, I'll work from this one. That's fine. I'm gonna place that down on my grid block. I just use the grid lines in the grid block. There you go. Can you kind of see him? Yeah, and I'm just gonna line up his body. It just makes it easier for stamping. Could you use a stamping tool? Absolutely, you could, right? And now we just wanna decide, like, where do we wanna stamp? Well, I'm gonna stamp this part, this more open part of the image, so I can see more of my background, right? If you do this, it's solid and it's gonna cover your background. So you can choose, but this is really one of the reasons why I love these kind of blueprint, sketchy looking stamps. So I'm gonna tap, tap, tap with Archival, make sure my stamp is nice and inked. There we go. Okay, we're gonna place this where we want it. I'll place it right there, that looks good. We're gonna stamp with purpose, just means we're gonna hold, hold, press, right? No CPR, just always, just give it some good pressure, lift that off, and there is our image over the image. So good. Now, if you wanted this image, this is all about building collage layers. Let's say you wanted your image to be like, hey Tim, I want this to be the focal point. I want to stamp it and I want everyone to know it's there. Okay, then I would suggest stamping and then embossing this, right? Put black embossing powder over that, and then you would really get that crisp definition. For me, I like to just create collage because I'm going to end up cutting this up, but it's totally on you. So, you know, let's say you wanted to, I don't know, stamp Artist Journal because you wanted that to be the focal point of this. Well, then I would suggest, you know, stamping it where you're going to stamp it and then emboss it, and that's always going to bring it to the foreground. So there's options when you're doing resist techniques and different backgrounds and how you create layers with your imagery. But that's paint resist, really simple. Now, at this point, because our paint is waterproof and our archival is waterproof, let me go in. Just gonna dry this real quick, show you one other thing, and we're gonna move on to another technique. So I wanna make sure both are dry. Could you go in and do some lifting? Well, sure, we could take, let me see. Let's see how much ink is soaked into this tag. We will do our best. I'm just gonna take a wet brush, just gonna go in with just a wet brush in that one area, like where his wing is. It's just a water brush, so it just has water in it. And absorb that color, right? So it's almost like, this was a technique I saw Diane Reevely do eons ago, and I love it. It's kind of like faux bleaching, but that's just, and I think we even did this back at Ranger U back in the day, which is just, you kind of paint with water, and we take off that color. And the beauty of this is that now my image that was somewhat part of the background is still part of the background, but now we have these really unique highlights that maybe you weren't expecting to get. That's what I love about a water brush. It's going to self-feed that water, so I don't have to worry about dipping a brush into water and getting too much water out, right? And the fact that it's a detailer, I mean, you can see really how fine, oh, there you go, how fine that the bristles are, but they're still, it's still a paintbrush. There you go. So every time you go over this with water, it's going to lift that ink. Why? Because the ink is water reactive, always, 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 unless we sealed it with microglaze, which we talked about. But our paint, forever permanent, archival, also permanent. So now look at that. Isn't that cool? So now you've got the dragonfly that's kind of bleached. And could you go in and then paint with another color? Sure, you could then watercolor, say with green, or you could do oxide over the top. You could do all sorts of really cool things over the top of this. In fact, Mario, would you mind grabbing me an oxide? There's cracked pistachio right there on the top. See that? The ink pad? There you go. Cool. Just to show you guys real quick. This is all about taking everything that you've, thanks Mario, that you've learned, So could this be a re-inker? Yes. Could this be the ink pad? Yes. But the fact is I can pick up some of that oxide, and now if I wanted to go in, I can now add that little bit of green into that white if I wanted to. And you can see my watercolor blend trick is just faded out with your finger. But see, the oxide is going to oxidize, so it could give me a green color. And if you don't like that, we can just go back over with water, because oxides are not permanent either, and we can lift that off too. It's just, it kind of becomes that coloring book for adults. And knowing what you know about all of those different processes, it's very cool to play around. So that's what I love about paint. Pretty cool tag, right? When we have our resisted background, we've stamped, we can do some lifting, just a lot of fun. All right, moving right along. Let's get that cleaned up. We did some resist. Let's talk about some other ways that we can work on resisting and lifting. Let's say we have just a painted tag, or again, piece of paper. I'm just working on tags because it's the quickest way for me to work. So let's just take a brayer, or take the mini one this time, a little sports car. And we'll add some colors. I'm just gonna we'll work with some bright colors on this one. A little twisted citron. And let's do some peacock feathers. Start with that background. Okay. And take our brayer. Again, just kind of pick that up. And the fact that I'm working on the mat is just gonna allow me to determine how much paint I want coated. So see how I want some heavy and some light. If you want the whole thing, just then keep working that. But for now, I'm just gonna go in and just brayer on some paint. Building almost kind of a patchwork, if you will. There's no water involved at this point. We're just working with paint. Could you go in with a paintbrush? Yes, you could. You do you, right? Just depends on the look, but for my background, I want it to be a bit, well, blocky. And you'll see why in a minute. Okay, I'm gonna go back in, pick up some more of this green, but I do want my entire background to have a layer of paint to start. Now again, the benefit of a paint, so you can see, I'm able to put a color on a color. Distress paint dries very, very quick if you're just using it by itself. So it does allow me to easily go in and add some layers. All right, perfect. I'm gonna just go in with a little bit more blue. We'll put that on the top. There we go. Bring some of that in there. All right, okay. Let me just take this off. Quick clean. So that's why I did two different sizes of brayers. One's usually great for a background, like the one that I showed you when I was just doing the whole thing. And then if I'm trying to apply color in areas, I find way more control with the mini, because again, it's like a sports car. All right, gets into tight spaces, corners. There we go. Clean that off. Clean that off. This still wet paint, so baby wipe, paper towel. That's the joy of a media mat. You can always work in a space. You've got this space to work in, this space to kind of do your mess, and it's very easy to kind of keep that going. All right. So next I'm going to just dry this. Just want to make sure that it's dry. And this could be any surface. So if you were working on something different, you could work on a whole different substrate, if you will. But we want to make sure that this layer is dry. Now this is kind of a paint resist. I saw Dina Wakely do this in a demo, and she was doing this with her paints. So you can do this with her paints. And I was like, I wonder if it would work with distress. How would I know? The only way to know is to do. So that's the other thing that's super important when it comes to working with different elements, is to try it. Try it with what you have and see if it works. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work. Okay. So next I'm just going to start with a color of paint. I'm going to take some stencils. Now these are the minis. I've been working on the past few Saturdays. I've been working with the regulation size stencils, so they're big. These are much smaller, so this is just going to give me a smaller footprint, especially for what I want to create on this, which is just to create a little bit of a kind of a lifting. So what I'm going to do, have a stencil at the ready. I've got some type of baby wipe, paper towel, something. You're going to need a little bit of water. And then again, you can go in with a brayer if you want. You can go in with a paintbrush. For this one, I'm just going to go in with my finger. and I just want to add some paint. Now, what's important about this one, that paint needs to be wet for you to then place your stencil in there. And while that's wet, we're going to go in with something wet, not super wet, just kind of damp. So this again is that baby wipe paper towel combo, because I don't want it to be super wet. And then we're able to lift that. Now the reason we can lift that is, one, our paint is permanent when dry, correct? So we know that when we wipe through this, it's not going to lift that background layer. If I want to fade this out, while this is wet, I can still go in and just kind of dab or soften that edge. But once it's dry, it's permanent on there. So that's really where the heat tool comes into play. I like to just dry this layer, so now I can add another layer. And every time you add a layer, it is going to reveal what's underneath. So the possibilities are endless. Now, stencils. If you get paint on your stencil, which you can see there's not much there, while it's wet, wipe it off. If you have a container of water, you can throw that in. Or again, if it dries, you can use hand sanitizer to completely remove it. But let's just say we wanted, well, I'll just put a little bit more pink on there, right? We need to make sure that we can see the paint, right? See how opaque that is and how shiny it is? If you spread the paint out too thin, well then it's more than likely going to be dry already, okay? Look at that. Cool fade. If you want to place that back, pretty easy to line this one up. We can lift a few more, but once it's dry, it's dry. Can you go and re-wet the paint? Denied. No, you cannot. It is going to be permanent when dry. So now let's dry this. We'll move on to another color. Do something just a little bit bigger, a little bit maybe more vivid, if you will. So let's take that. Here we'll do a little spice marmalade. Definitely a vibrant color. Okay, let's put that down. And see, I think just kind of by using my finger, I'm just getting some interesting, I guess, brush strokes, but they're kind of finger strokes. So that's it. Because like I said, I'm not really savvy with a paintbrush, so this works for me. I'm going to take something that's a little bit bigger. This is a favorite, right? It's got a nice big opening, and I'll place this down. Well, maybe I'll place it this way. The whole thing about layering stencils, when I call them layering stencils, they're not designed to like build and layer, I would guess, like today's layering stencils where you take, stencil 1 and then stencil 2 and all that. This was just about, hey, take these stencils, they're not sized to anything specific, and now you can go in and just layer them on top of each other just to use parts and pieces. So it's not like a full background, if you will, right? So that's just going to reveal, there we go, let's get that to focus. Why isn't it focusing today? Is that working? Ah, there we go. See that? So that's going to layer on top. If you want to get rid of that, well, if it's wet, you can. Perfect, right? And you can see that we can just keep going and going and going and going. That's the beauty. But this, again, is a background. So I could stamp on this, stamp with archival. I can journal on top of this because this paint is completely matte finish. But see the pattern or texture that a brayer gives? That to me is something that I just can't really get with a paintbrush because maybe I'm too heavy-handed. I'm not sure, but I know what works, and as what works for me, I should say. And while I'm working on things like that, that's where tools come into play. So when we launched the brayers this year, that was really what it was about, is just kind of creating these little elements. All right. So next I'm just going to do a little bit of yellow, a little mustard seed. Okay. Just a dot. I'm going to take this one, really spread it out. Once if you're new to a media mat, or if you have a media mat, once you kind of get used to where you place your mediums, I do think that you'll get a lot more creative freedom. Now on the brayer, here's what I'm doing. I'm pushing most of this medium off so you can see that it's really pretty clean. And then I'm just lightly picking this up so I get heavy paint in certain areas. And that's just going to allow me to just add some little bit of yellow marks over the top of this, right? Just a little bit. I think I want even a little bit more intense. Okay, so just a drip, that's all we need. Move that, pick this up. Okay, again, you can see what's on your brayer, so that's gonna just determine, there we go. Because I want that opacity coming through. So by picking that up, I think in demoing it, I was just replacing too much. So now look at that. See, we can see our yellow, even though it's on top of the blue, on top of the green, or on top of the pink, because paint is opaque. Paint's opaque, so the fact that it is really gives you that versatility of layering. Let me just clean this off. It just comes right off with anything wet. So easy to clean and put back on. And we'll clean this. Excellent. Cool background, right? Simple, paint lifting. So as you can see, again and again, stamp on, do whatever you want to do. You can just keep going with that, right? Moving right along. We doing okay, Mario? Okay, just want to make sure that, you know, I'm not just going off the rails here for different things. So let's say we wanted to take that idea, but you had something that you already did. Let me see if I can find something we already did, right? I've got a basket of different backgrounds, right? Different things that maybe we've already created, right? So we created tags, right? Remember this one? That was kind of the reverse spray. Okay, let's do that. That'll work. Have my little utility cart there, use it all the time. So this one was a spray that we did last week. Here's what we're gonna do. If you have a background that you've inked and you want to create a resist with paint, here's what I would suggest. I'm just gonna take a paper towel on this one, and I'm going to use some resist spray, okay? And resist spray, it's just going to provide a kind of a sealer for this surface. And I think we talked about this last week. I think Natifa did, like Juicy Christian. She talked about using this as a sealer to add other elements. And it didn't click in that medium, but it certainly clicked when it comes to paint. So yes, you can use this as a sealer. So I've just sprayed over the entire surface. So you can see how wet that is, right? Because resist spray is going to resist. That's what it's designed to do. In this case, I put it over a tag that's already done. Then I'm just going to take another surface. Let's just do, well, I'll do another tag because they're here. Let's see, what sort? Mayor of Tagtown. All right, let's do this. We're going to just do some numbers. I'm going to place this down. Now I have a tag that is smaller than my surface. So do you always, I mean, I have a stencil smaller. So do we need to always have giant stencils? No. Can you? Sure, you can. Of course you can. We need all variety of crafty things. But if you don't have it, just mask off any of those hard edges that you might get depending on the size. So here I just took some paper towels and I masked off the rest of that stencil, and I'm just going to go in just with my resist spray and spray through that stencil. I'm going to lift this off. Okay. I'm going to place this in water, so I have just water off to the side. As soon as you put it in water, you'll see the resist kind of gets cloudy and lifts off. So now I've got some resist through a stencil. I love this negative stencil, I do. It's kind of this negative numbers. Resist spray, again, when you're done, so when I'm finished with the demo, I actually remove this, I unscrew this, I put this little stem of that sprayer in the drain of the bathroom sink, run the water, and spray until water sprays through it. And then I take it out, remove all the water, put it back in, and that's how you keep your spray from never ever clogging up on something like resist. So even like when I'm using it, I'll just wipe off the top, but when I'm done for the day, I will actually flush through it, and then I haven't had to replace my sprayer since I started doing that. So there we go. Okay, so now we have some resist on here. What are we gonna do with this? Well, we could let it air dry. I prefer to let it air dry actually, but in this case, I'm going to go in and dry this. Now, if you use a heat tool on resist spray, it's going to crackle a little bit. Maybe you like that and there's nothing wrong with it. I just prefer to let it air dry because I don't want the crackle. So I'm just gonna provide a little bit of heat over on this one just to maybe give it a head start because I'll have some time, and I'm gonna focus on this one for now. A couple of things to know with resist spray. It's a very interesting medium because it is designed to resist, but surprisingly enough, when you put it over a surface, you don't get as much wicking. You'll get a little bit depending on where you concentrate it, but you don't get as much, I think, wicking that you would with water. And I find that really surprising. Maybe it's because it's thick. I'm not really sure why, but I just want to point that out, that even though this is an inked background that we did last week that was not sealed, we were able to put resist spray over the top and it did not make our image go crazy. And the quicker you dry it, the less reaction time you would have. Anyway, all right. So here's what we have. Look at that. So here we have a resist tag. Beautiful. I mean, I just like the shine. So if you're ever looking for a quick way to make your paper shiny briny, then you go and just put this on the top and you're good to go. You don't have to worry about, you know, clear embossing powder or whatever. So that's just a great way to do shine. But because it has this over the top, it is now resisted, which means we can take other things, other elements, and we can add to this, right? So let's just take that like honeycomb. I think that's pretty cool. Maybe we'll even take, I don't know, we'll do the dots again. I like the dots, I like the X's, I like different things. And this one I want to go pretty bold, right? So I'm going to go grungy. I'm going to just take some black soot paint, right? Black soot, you can see, pretty fluid, I would say. It's a very, very fluid black paint, but I wanted that because I like to use it for splattering and things like that, which we will get to, okay? So let's be at the ready. I'm going to go in and I'm going to add some paint. Now we can add paint a couple of ways. Because I want to add a pretty good amount of paint, I'm going to go in with a blending tool, right? So I got my little trash can. It's where I keep all sorts of foams and felts and whatnot. A little trash can by my hipster Mickey. All right, I'm gonna make sure we have foam. I had foam on there already, so we're gonna just go in and add some of this. Now, what I'm going to do is just take some paint and just put this down. Again, could this be your finger? Yes. A brush? Yes. But we're going to place this down. We're going to do exactly what we did before, which is put down a stencil and just kind of wipe through this, okay? Now what I like about resist spray, which I find really interesting, is that it does provide a texture. So you can use that texture to your advantage, meaning, and I'll show you in just a second. I'm just lightly going over with this, and you'll see I'm always working with like a slightly damp paper towel. I don't like to use any fresh baby wipe or anything like that because I think it just gets too wet. And if your towel or whatever you're wiping with is too wet, then you just make that paint react, right? Go back to our very first technique. You would technically make that paint start to wick and it would wick under the stencil, right? So here this is just allowing me to lift that off. Look at that, okay? Because we've resisted this, that's going to work. Because if you just tried to put paint over ink, that paint is not going to want to lift off. The reason it worked on the last tag is because it was paint over paint. So this was just about resisting something different. And I just like to go in, I just like the whole organicness of doing this. So again, just taking the towel the same way you would go in with an ink blending tool. Just, you don't have to live with that. While that paint is wet, play around with it, right? Kind of chew off that edge so you get the look or effect that you want it to be. Pretty cool. It kind of reminds me of that embossing glaze that we do with the crayon. All right, so then this one, maybe I want to add some X's, okay? Does paint always have to be a resist? No. No, we could just go in just with this particular stencil. I'm just kind of dabbing through this just because I want that stencil design to be just a little faded, right? And we can just stencil with it as well. It's going to sit on top because we're working with paint. So that's really the fun of this. Again, this just goes in the water because that's just going to take that paint right off. So that's just doing some lifting. Pretty easy. So far, so good. Now, the cool thing about this, while this is wet, you can wash this foam, right? So if you have a container of water, you can rip off your foam and you can throw it in with your stencils if you want to change this out. If you want a dedicated foam to your paint, the greatest thing about distress paint is it doesn't get crunchy. It doesn't harden because it doesn't have fillers in it. So if this paint dries on this foam, you will still be able to use this foam again with that color. Well, any color really, but I just kind of have a dedicated one. So if you know you're gonna have like a foam because you do a lot of painting, you know, in black or white. Again, I saw the envelope with just like quick black paint. It's very easy to do with blending foam, whether it's a domed foam or a flat one, because you can just keep that foam dedicated to that paint and use it again and again, and you don't have to clean it like you would a paintbrush. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, so that's how we can do that kind of lift technique over an inked background. Moving right along. Next, we are going to just utilize paint as a top layer, okay? And I'll share this with you because I've done this many, many times for textured paper. We talked about, this is the Distress wood grain cardstock, right? You can see all the different cool wood grain effects you can get. This is Distress cracked leather cardstock, and you can see all the great colors you can get of cracked leather. Now, both of these papers, these cardstocks, these are part of the Distress line. Let me take these in. So this is a textured paper, and the texture is completely organic from one sheet to the next. So it's not like you're not going to get that knot hole in the same spot in every sheet. It's cut from a larger parent sheet, so you get something random. So cracked leather and wood grain, these are both really cool cardstocks because it has a texture on one side but smooth on the other. So if you were going to utilize it, I like to just use it as an accent, but if you wanted the back because you're going to stamp on it or write on it, I mean, that's pretty cool that you have both options. Now, this is just kind of the process. It's a normal substrate. It's just that regular matte paper that will take color. So we're going to add color first, and then we're going to show how to bring out that highlight, that texture. I learned this trick from Stacy. See, I learn from all of you. I say it all the time that I learn by watching and being inspired by all of you. So when I talk about the importance of sharing, it matters because you just seeing an idea, it's like, oh, that's a great way to do it. Not the fact that I didn't know how to do that, right? I've just done it a different way. And so when I saw different people do things their own way, it's like, oh, I kind of like that idea. And that's the importance of our creative industry. Some people are very territorial with how they think and share, but I believe that if you put it out there, you should put it out there to inspire, not to own, right? There's a lot of people that put ideas out there and then they're shocked that somebody was inspired by it. It's like, well then, isn't that kind of why you shared it, to inspire? But again, with inspiration, I think the right thing to do is always call it out. Then I try to do that. If I'm inspired by someone, there's nothing wrong with just giving a shout out, right? That's what it's all about. So we're going to do two different backgrounds. There's our paper. That's how we're going to start. And I'm just going to work with some spray stains as well as oxide spray, right? We know from last week the importance of mixing these together to create some cool backgrounds. So I've got some different colors, again, spray stain and oxide. First one we're going to do is wood grain. Just give it a little spray. And let's do some weathered wood. How fitting for wood. And you can see I just kind of like splotch it around. I don't hose down the entire thing in the same color because I like the fact of just filling it in with a puzzle, okay? This one is oxide, so this is the one that needs to be shaken up. And I've always told you that if you don't want to take the time to shake it back and forth, then you should cover up the nozzle with a paper towel because you're gonna get some leakage if you spray it, if you shake it this way, all right? So then we're just gonna go in, just gonna add some of that. Again, not tons of it. And then, okay, let's take a little gathered twigs. That'll be good. Again, oh, yum. Okay, add a little bit of water just to get some movement. Okay, there's our background so far, right? Pretty cool. Again, why are we using sprays? Because we want them to look, well, sprayed. So we're taking advantage of that. We're gonna do a little frayed burlap as well because I do like some frayed burlap. You can tell it's almost gone. Okay, now, while this one is just sitting aside, I'm gonna go right into cracked leather. We're gonna do same thing, maybe some different colors. So we'll start with some water. I think on this one, okay, I'll take some gathered twigs on this. This one's just gonna be a little bit, there you go, a little bit of hickory smoke because it just depends on the kind of leather you want, but I like having a little bit of that haziness. That's the importance of an oxide, is it's gonna give you that. Ground espresso, wonderful for this because that's gonna really deepen it up. And you can see when I use my sprays, I always like to grab the neck too to get that little splattery look. Okay, nice, okay. So I'll put my splat box aside for now. Let's dry them both. Another thing, knowing you're gonna do something different, well, then you might as well do them simultaneously. If you have all your sprays out, just spray a bunch of different backgrounds and cardstocks and all of that. and we'll see what we get. Now, as these are drying, as we're kind of doing our own thing, we're just going to, I like to always spray a little bit of water on there, get a little movement. You never know what things are going to look like until they're dry, really. So there's often times that I'll do a background, I'm like, it's not what I want. And I spend so much time spraying it while it's wet and not giving a chance for it to dry. So even like this one, because at first I thought, oh boy, too much brown, right? I mean, I know I love that, but this was really important to kind of give it a shot. Now, I am going to wet that out because I want that to wick a little bit. But look at the importance of that little bit of hickory smoke that we threw in there. You see that smoky gray oxide come through. So good. Over here, we can see a little bit of that greenish hue. That's from bundled sage and some frayed burlap. But then we have the blue undertones because of weathered wood. So there you go. All right. Just going to dry both of these. I agree, Shell. She's like, too much brown? Never. Never is right. I love grunge. But I think it's important to remember when you're playing, just take out the ones that you have and see that what if. Do a little bit of spray here and a little bit of spray there. Don't be afraid to just leave some white space. You can always fill in the blanks. But if you want color to look blended or mottled, well, you have to actually apply it that way. You can't just spray the entire thing blue and then spray the entire thing brown and then spray the entire thing green and expect to have individual elements of color. That's just not going to happen. So it is important to just kind of look at this. So now let's look at this background. This white space, I'm okay with that, but for wood grain, I kind of don't want that. But I love my spray pattern, so I don't really want to change that. Well, we have the technology, right? We can jump right back to our ink pads. In this case, I'm going to take a little vintage photo, and we can just fill in the blanks that way, right? So that's a whole other thing that if you're working with stuff and you like the pattern that you have, well, then just use an ink tool to fill it in, because otherwise, if I would have sprayed more, I would have lost this, right? Would have lost that spray pattern that I happen to like. And same thing over here, right? You can add some brown or some gray or whatever, just if you wanted to cover that up. All right, so here's where the paint comes in, because you're like, wait a minute, Holtz, this is supposed to be a paint demo. Yes, it is. So if you want to create highlights, if you want to be able to see the color, right? That's where paint comes in. And this is what I was saying, inspired by. When I first saw Stacy do this, she was using her finger and she was just kind of lightly touching over the top. I don't have that agility, right? I have pork chop fingers, and I just think when I try to do that, I'm going to get way too much paint on something so lightly textured, because this is not textured like a 3D folder from Sizzix, right? It's just, that's it. So what we're going to do is we're going to highlight that with paint, knowing that paint is going to sit on the top of this. I'm going to take a little antique linen. I like this color. You could do any color you want. You could do weathered wood. You could do speckled egg. You could do picket fence. I love antique linen. I also love old paper, right? Old paper is going to be a little on the greenish side. This is going to be a little on the creamier side. So either one. In fact, now that I grabbed this one, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to probably do a little bit of both. All right, so there's some, oh, is this one even opened yet? Nope, new one. Got to take this off. All right. That's the other nice thing. Nice new bottle. All right, let's do some of that. And we'll take a little antique linen. I'm going to put some over here, because I'll probably just do them on different ones. All right, again, width of the brayer. Width of the brayer. I just wipe my finger off with a baby wipe. And now we'll go into, where is my brayer? There we go. This big one, because I want to be able to kind of go over the entire background. So for this, I'll do some old paper. And what I want to do on this is I want to cover the brayer. So if you're covering the brayer, you want to roll and lift, because if you just go back and forth, one, it's going to slide, or two, it's just going to hit one spot, right? So we just want to roll and lift. And then once you roll and lift, you can work that paint into your brayer, because we want this to be pretty light, all right? And then we're just going to go over this paper. I'm going to take a little bit of this one, a little antique linen, and we're going to hit those high points, okay? So this one, remember about how we work with the brayer. If we want something to be a little bit more intense, well, then we just kind of let that paint sit on the roller. If we want it to be lighter, and this is what I love. You can see I can just keep going over and over, and now it brings out that wood grain pattern. Same thing on leather. We've got that cracked leather, but now if we go over this with a brayer, we need to get some more paint on there. And I'm not pressing down hard. I'm just letting this kind of do its thing, just roll where it's going. I like going in different directions. But now what that's doing is that is picking up that texture of the cracked leather with that paint. And that is permanent. That paint on top is a permanent layer. And I love how it really brings out the texture of these papers. Now, the other nice thing is, let's say you still wanted to go back and ink the edges or do something over the top. You can, but your paint is always going to maintain its color because it is a waterproof medium. Now, if you just wanted to go from this to this, right? We know what we just did, resist spray. So the way this one was done, and that other, I have a shiny wood grain one, I think, as well. Both of these, okay? This is just like how I did that other background. So if you want to make these shiny, like patent leather or whatever, you can just spray some resist spray over the top to create an effect. But, right, really, really simple to add paint with a brayer over textured. Now this was textured cardstock. Could you do this over something that you ran through your embossing folder? Sure. It's a great way that you can add texture to the high points just with this brayer, because again, it's that soft rubber brayer. And when I say soft rubber, I don't mean like squishy, squeezy, like softer rubber brayers. I just mean from a distress perspective, it is completely different than the Red Ranger brayer, which I find to be a little too rigid. All right, I'm gonna clean that up, and we're gonna move along. There we go. I have all these. Okay, so next, what else can we put paint on? Well, we can put paint on other substrates. That could be metal, it could be metallic paper, right? So if you wanted to do metal, you could take foil sheets, you could apply that to cardstock, cover that up. Or if you have any kind of metallic cardstocks that have some type of metallic printing or even laminate. Now you have to be careful with certain laminate cardstocks because certain laminate cardstocks might repel or resist the paint at first, but keep going and it will eventually adhere. These are all done with different Sizzix folders, different 3D embossing folders, because we were talking about texture. So it could be gears or swirls, or I love this riveted one. It could even be something pretty like roses, or the impresslets, right? We can alter some papers. Now the metallic papers I like to work with, because there are a bazillion. I love to work with my Ideology craft stock because it is metallic, but it's got a craft core. So this is actually printed in ink. So the metallics that you see, and there's a bunch of different colors. This is champagne, I love onyx. Because it is printed in ink, this allows me to sand it and distress it, but it's perfect with paint. Really, really perfect with paint, okay? Because as I mentioned, some papers are foiled. Now, you've seen, I've done this in previous demos with the foil tape. So this time I'm gonna stick just to metallic cardstock because I think that's really important. And we'll do something steampunkish, and we'll also do something pretty, okay? Gonna go back to this one that I told you I have that dedicated tool. We're gonna take some black distress paint. Gonna add some of that to the mat. Gonna place my cardstock down, paint this over the top, and I'll just do half just so you can see the difference. Okay, and what I'm doing is I'm using this domed foam because I wanna get paint in the grooves, right? So I'm going to dab this down. Now here's the thing about this technique. If you stop and let this dry, you would have to sand it off. And when you sand this paper off, you would be sanding down to the craft core, right? So what we want to do on this particular one is it needs to kind of dry, but not dry fully. So I prefer to use a heat tool for this technique, but it is important to remember that because once it dries, now you just have just black cardstock. So I have a fresh baby wipe now. Thanks, Mario. Mario's tidying up behind me. So because I don't like to use a fully wet baby wipe, I put a baby wipe into a dry paper towel. I squish the two together, and then I have two pieces that are just damp. So that's why you see me kind of grab either one. They do both things. So I'm going to take my heat tool, and I'm going to just start drying this, but not completely dry it. It only takes a second or so, and that's what's going to get that paint to kind of hold on there. And then I'll just go in with that slightly damp paper towel or slightly damp baby wipe, and I'll just start lifting that paint. And you can lift to however much you want, right? just to get that effect. Isn't that cool? So it gets all that color into those areas. Now, let's say you were going and you're like, oh, this is just amazing. I just can't stop. It's so beautiful. And you realize, oh, you just cleaned it all off. Okay, cool. Just paint it again. Give it a second. Give it a second just to dry-ish, and then start going. So you can see I'm just kind of skipping and scuffing. Now, when we did this with alcohol ink, we needed to do this with steel wool, right? Because the alcohol ink was permanent. So now let me show you if we let our paint get really tacky dry. Because the only way to, I think, kind of mess this technique up is if it dries fully. So this one I'm just going to dry a little bit more, not totally cooked, but a little bit more. And so now you see when I go over it, there's definitely a lot more black paint that stays in there. But if you just kind of keep at it, it's not fully dry. You can get a little bit more of almost like an eroded look. Can you see that? How the paint has started to dry in areas and it grabs onto it. And once that paint dries, it's not coming off. But I don't know. I think it's very cool. But you'll see that, you know, if you're trying to wipe over this with a damp paper towel and the paint's not coming off, well, the paint's not coming off. And you're like, well, thanks, Captain Obvious. I get that. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's go to something pretty, because it doesn't always have to be steampunk, industrial. It could be a great way that we can take paint to accent a beautifully embossed metallic image. And this, again, is cardstock. This happens to be that champagne color. This is in the pad that's champagne and onyx. I love this. Could you leave these little paint strokes? I'm going to kind of go in with the blending tool. This is where I normally would use sticky grid, so I don't have my pork chop fingerprints. But I like the idea that this looks very kind of, I don't know, sooty, if you will. So I'm using my blending tool in different directions. I'll show you what I mean when I hold it up. But take a look at that. I mean, shut up. That's all the detail. And all these little streaks, that's from just using the blending tool in different directions. So it does look very, I don't know, much more rustic. If you didn't want that, while this is wet, you can go in and wipe it off, right? You can clean it. But once this dries, it's permanent. And I love the way that it just really brings out the detail of an embossed image, right? So stunning. And there's so many different colors of this metallic paper that you can really do anything. And this is just a side-by-side. I mean, it's a different color paper, but you can see that, yeah, you can see the rose. Obviously, it's a 3D folder. It's beautiful. But when you start putting in that paint in there, so different. And Distress ink would not bond to this paper the way paint does, right? Distress ink would want to come off. You can ink this paper, but it doesn't grab into those crevices the way paint does. So with that, that's the beauty of like taking an Impresslit, right? This is just a piece of paper, but the fact that I can take that and see how that foam just keeps that paint wet. I know that Dina and Di, they use the foam as well. It's like, it's a great tool for paint. It really is. And the dome foam, oh my gosh, it makes it so much easier. Look at that. What? Come on. That is just gilded perfection. All right, so that's how simple it is to do black distress paint over, just gonna add a little water to that, just over metallic paper, just to create a nice industrial finish. I love the look of that. I think it's really beautiful. All right, get those out of the way. You guys got that? Good? Good, yep. Impresslit, impressed, yes? Good. Okay, yeah. Well, I always say it's kind of hard. I'm gonna show you this one. This is a new multi-level, right? So multi-level is not quite a 3D, but it's got like a couple of steps. Keep that in mind. Try this out with other folders. I might still have enough paint on this one. Try this out with other folders, because anything that's gonna give you some dimension or texture is gonna grab that paint, even if it's not 3D. I mean, obviously 3D is gonna give you the most definition, but certainly something like even this multi-level, look at that. See how over here, you see it and you're like, okay, that's pretty. But when you add the paint, you get the multi-level. You see all the different layers and levels of that embossed design. Here you see it, but you see a swirl, and that's what always brings out the detail. Okay, moving right along. That's what I'll keep doing. All right, let's see here. It's like, gosh, what do I want to do? I better look. Okay, I'm doing okay, right? Not bad. Kind of watching the time. Let's see where I want to jump to is always my thing. Right, Mario?
Right.
Okay.
What can I help you with? Need something?
No, no, I'm good. I'm going to share this one. So I will preface this one every time I do this, like Mario and I have, like we remember when we taught this at stores in class. This is one of those techniques that is either going to work or it's not going to work. And you have to be okay with that, right? Because the more you do it, the better you'll get at it. And I don't say that often about techniques. Usually I'm like, oh, that's okay. You can fix it. You can do this. This one is like, it's either going to work for you or it didn't. And if it didn't work, well, that's okay. You'll just have to do it again. But this is called eroded metallic. And the beautiful thing about eroded metallic is that it's going to give you, well, an eroded metallic. Let me just show you. It's going to give you a finish that is going to look, well, like eroded metallic. And we can do it in a lot of different colors, right? I'm going to show you with copper. That's my favorite. And it's actually bronze paint, but it looks like oxidized or patinaed copper. But you can also do it with brass, right? That's really cool. You can also do it with that pewter color. So we're going to work with distress paint, but we're going to work with distress paint that are metallic. So I'm going to use antique bronze. That's going to be my go-to color, but it will work with any of the other metallics. I just prefer bronze because, well, I like that look. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with, oh, this is our resist one. I'm going to come back to that. See, that's the one that we sprayed the resist through. Let me just put some stuff on it real quick. Y'all don't mind, do you? No? Okay. That's it. Well, that is kind of a good part, right, Mario? Like, do you guys mind if I do this? It's like, no. Okay. No. All right. I'm just taking a little crushed olive, a little speckled egg. I'm going to spray this. So this was the one that we did that stencil with the resist spray. See with those numbers? Yeah. So I just have some paint and some water there. We're just going to go through this. Okay. I'll set this one aside to kind of do its thing for a minute. And I'll show you in just a bit what this is going to be. Okay. All right. So for this one, just want to talk about this one. So this is the one that we did the resist spray, right? Now, because we did paint, see how thick that paint is? If you let that paint dry on here, it's going to cover up some of the resist, right? If it's too thick. Where it's fluid, where it's thin, you're going to start seeing our image come through. So I always say that, like, if I'm going to use paint for resist spray, I just want to make sure that my background is a bit more fluid than opaque. I don't mind if there are certain spots that are opaque, but you can see there's a lot of water on here because I want this to be a bit more fluid. So yeah, I did all that kind of psyching up for eroded metallic, and then we're jumping back to resist. That's all right. On the replay, you can go back and forth and all that. But I just want to kind of show the difference. When we were doing resist spray with ink, it was very, very easy to just wipe off. But with paint, you need to be a bit more cautious, I guess, if you will. So I'm drying most of this, but I'm paying attention to where I have my spray resist. And I can see some of that come up, but I can also see that I've got a pretty hefty spot of paint. So before that dries completely, I'm just going to take a little paper towel and just kind of work some of that off. There we go. There's some, you can see my resist numbers. Let me let that focus. This is a negative, so there's our numbers coming through. So I knew that paint was going to cover it. There we are. So now I can go back and finish drying this. All right. Then while this is drying, I will take a color of spray. Let me just find, there we go, some weathered wood. Right, that was ink, right, spray stain, because I wanted to really add that shadow around the resist in that area. You'll see, you'll see. Love that splatter effect of a spray. All right. And it's, again, paint is just, it's another one of those mediums, the same way we were introducing oxides with ink. There we have it. So you see how this particular one, this is that kind of negative stencil. So it was actually protecting everything but the numbers. So the numbers, there we go, you can see from the resist spray, the numbers are actually not protected. and that's why it's absorbing that color medium. And I think the resist spray just gives it a whole nother level. But I love being able to throw some blue over that green and still see both colors. So that's just, again, the start of a background. I love the texture of the resist spray, the fact that it's shiny and that you can keep working over it. Okay, I needed to come back to that, right, Mario? Because I say that a lot in demos. I'm like, we'll get back to that. And then, well, I don't. And then at the very end, they're like, are you going to go back to that? Yeah. Okay, let's do eroded metallic. So here's what we're going to do for eroded metallic. What we need is we need a base color or colors. And so in this case, I'm going for patina. So let's take some different shades of blue. Let's take some different shades of green. I'll even throw in some twisted citron, a little rustic wilderness I think would be good. And heck, let's do a little campfire. So those are going to be kind of my patina-ish colors. I think that could be good. And these could really, they could be any colors that you choose, but this first layer is what's going to come through your background. Okay. Then we have our metallic. In this case, it's going to be antique bronze. That's what I'm choosing for mine. And then we're going to, let me get this out of the way. Just going to need a blending, I need a clean blending foam. So let me just take this one that I already took out before. All right, we're going to start with a background. So we're going to take our tag. Let me pop this one off. I do like that the dome foams have just, they're a little thicker, so kind of easier to remove. Could you do this with a brush? Yes. Oh, in fact, I need a brush. I think I have a collage brush somewhere. No, I guess I didn't. No, I have one. I don't, there we go. I'm like, I have one. I just didn't know. You want some, for this one, you're going to want some sort of paintbrush. It could be a collage brush. It could be anything flat. You'll see why in just a second. All right. So what we're going to start with is our foundation of color. So our foundation is going to be these patina-ish colors. So we'll take some blue. That's a little mermaid lagoon. This one's a little peacock feathers. Do a couple of drips of that. I could leave them here so you guys can see them. We'll take a little twisted citron. That's a nice green, nice electric lime green. Rustic wilderness, okay? Rustic wilderness, it's dark, so you want to just a little bit of that. You might want more of that. I can always go back and add more, but just remember when you're making a palette, don't just get too crazy with puddles of paint that you may not use, right? So usually a drip or two is a good place to start. Then I'll take dome foam. Again, this could be done with a paintbrush, doesn't really matter. And I'm just going to pick up my blues first, and I'm just going to dab those colors out, right? Or I could just swipe it across. It honestly doesn't matter application because all of it is going to get covered up, okay? So next, just take some other colors, and we're going to fill in like a patchwork. Okay, so there, ooh, look at that rustic wilderness, really good, right? Excellent. So once I have this kind of foundation, let me put a little bit more blue on here. Okay. Now I want to go in and just add highlights because I have enough of my surface. We need to make sure that the entire tag is covered in paint. That's really important. Really needs to be covered in paint. You don't want to leave any exposed areas, but there's areas here you can see. I want this to look splotchy because you might look and say, wow, blending tool, not a good idea. No, you'll see why. If you can get splotches of color, you're just going to end up with just some really interesting surprises when you do the reveal, right? So that's why I wanted it to just look like a hot mess. There is a method to the madness. In other words, I don't like to just blend all the colors together. I just don't. But I like to have a foundation, and then I can just go in with my finger, or you can go in with a tool, whatever you want, and just kind of move some of that color around, all right? So once we're happy with it, and I am pretty happy with it, I just want to get a little bit more blue up there. Okay. We're going to let this dry, or we're going to dry it with a heat tool. So now let me clean up real quick. Again, baby wipe, clean up the paint. Clean that up off the glass while it's wet. See, so easy, and re-dry. Okay, there we go. Perfect, perfect, perfect. All right. There we go. Okay. So does this have to be heat set? No, but it does need to be dry, completely dry. So you see that shine? Not dry, okay? If you want to dab some of that off, you can, but we need to make sure that this is dry before our next layer. So even those, usually those areas that you kind of go in with your fingerprints, we want to make sure it's dry. Okay, perfect. All right. There we have it. So we have a dry tag, we touch it. Okay, oop, I feel it, look at that. See a little shine? I was gonna say I felt it, because if you touch it and it's not wet, it's dry, but if I touched it, there you go. Kind of felt a little wet. All right. Yeah, I see some questions. Are there replacements for these? Yeah, absolutely. There are replacements for those. Okay, here we go. So now we have a dry foundation. Deep breath. And I say this, and really, I'm not saying it to be dramatic in any way. I'm saying this because if you have everything right and ready to go, then the technique should work great for you. I will be honest, I've done this technique for years, and there's the time that like it just didn't work that time. But if you get everything ready, you should be good to go. So here's what we've got. We have our painted tag, okay? We're gonna have a surface, and we're going to have another paper towel. Now, a paper towel that has a texture, this one happens to have a texture, that's going to transfer. Right? So if you have a Viva paper towel, I don't even know if I have any more Viva, but if you have a Viva paper towel or something without texture, it's going to give you a better lift, but anything is going to work. But you do need to understand that because we're going to really be printing. Oh, you have one? Yeah. Sweet. I do have one. Thanks. This is Viva. Viva is just a brand of paper towel, but you can see it's smooth and stretchy. So I like to put that over the top. But if you have a regular paper towel, just know that it's going to transfer that pattern. We're going to take a brush, and we need a brush because we need to cover this with paint quickly. The blending tool is going to just be too light, so you want something that's going to get a lot of paint on. A brayer, that's not going to put enough paint on quick enough. So the idea here is we need to get the paint on, and we need to keep the paint wet. Then you're going to want some type of spray bottle, right? A sprayer that's going to be able to add drips or drops, or if you don't have a sprayer, maybe a bowl or a bucket of water that you can flick water on. And you need all of that at the ready. So here we go. We're going to take, of course Mario had a supply Viva. He did, Stacy. So we're going to take our metallic. Now, I found that this particular technique works with regular color over metallic, meaning I haven't been very successful with a color over a color. I haven't been successful at all doing this. Even though I was able to lift it with the stencil, this particular technique, I found that it's better to do colors of paint and one of the metallics. But again, play around with what you have and see what's going to work for you. Now you're going to want to be fairly generous with the paint this time. There's probably more paint than I've put out for any color, but we need to make sure that we have enough paint that's going to cover this tag right away. Okay, I'm going to get this paper towel out of the way from the background because I don't want it there, because any paint that's on the glass, I want to pick it up. So we're ready to go. So we've got this, we have our water at the ready, we've got a brush, we've got a tag, we have our paper towel. So here we go. We're going to pick up some paint, and we're really going to load up this brush, and then we're going to cover this tag with paint. And when I say cover, I mean cover. Just get it on there. Get enough of that paint over it. Once it's on there, set it down, pick up your water bottle, and you're just going to start dripping the water on. And when I say drip, that's what I mean, drip. So we're not spraying, but we're creating kind of puddles here and there, right? We might want some little flickety bits. Okay, once the water's on there, and I'll just try to hold this up without tipping it. Can you see that? Where we've got pools of water? You're in a pretty good space right now, because here's what we're relying on. We're relying on the fact that the paint underneath is dry. We put a top layer of metallic paint on, and while the paint was wet, we kept it wet. But now we want to go in and dry the rest of this. And we don't want to dry the water drops, because that's not going to work. So we just go over it for a few seconds just to dry that. And then we're going to take something porous, and that's where the paper towel comes into play. We're going to lay this down over our tag. That's going to absorb the water. And then we're going to peel this off. And when we do, this is the effect that we get. We get this eroded metallic. Any place that the water was is going to lift up that paint. Any place that the paint dried, it's going to be permanent, right? It doesn't impact the bottom color because our bottom color was permanent, but here's some things that could go wrong. if you put on your metallic paint and you keep brushing and brushing and brushing, and you start with a thin layer, but then you keep going, well, that thin layer has already dried to over the color. So even though you have wet paint on the top, if you add water, it's only going to go through that layer and your first layer of metallic is done. That's why it was important when you started painting, you just went through the whole thing and you're good. Don't go back 3 or 4 times because each layer essentially dries on the tag. And the idea is we tried to get that metallic on quickly, and while it was wet, added water which went down to the color, right? So by adding those pools of water, that kept that paint wet. Then we had to dry the surrounding paint. Because if you just put water on and did your paper towel, it's going to take everything off because the paint is all still wet. So we needed to dry around that area. Now, could you go over this again? Could you add more metallic and do it again and erode through another layer? Sure you can. You could do this again and again, but I'm not going to because I'm happy with this. It's not finished. I'm going to show you what the next step we're going to do, but I'm good with the eroded part. So with that, I'm going to clean this up. Okay, so see how quick that paint dries? But on the mat, just water usually is going to take it off unless it's dried for, you know, an hour or so, then you're done. This, I'm just going to throw in water with my stencil. It's not going to hurt that brush. On your craft mat, this is like a dry erase board, so you don't even need water. It's a coated mat. So there we go. So now we have this. So now what I want to do is I'm going to dry it. So good. Yeah, I agree, Mel. The flickety bits they are essential. They really are. Okay. Cool. Then we're going to just dry this. We want to make sure it's dry to the touch. Perfect. Here we go. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our ink pads, right? You can use whatever colors. I'm going to go with some good old standards, vintage photo and walnut stain. And what I'm going to do is cover this with ink. Could you use stain? Yeah, stain's a bit more fluid than I like for this particular effect, but use what you have. But this time I'm going direct to paper, right? Direct to paper, smashing it down. And now I'll take my blending tool and I'm just going to go around and make sure that my ink is blended on this. And you'll see there is a significant amount of ink on there. And you're like, oh boy, I liked it just before you started that mess. Well, good. You do you. I like this, and here's why. Once I have ink on here, here's what we know. Distress paint is a water-reactive paint that is permanent when dry. So we know that this layer is dry, and this layer is dry. So that means all of our paint, that first tag that I showed you, is permanent. This is always water-reactive. Always, always. So the fact that we put a lot of ink on here, even though it will go on the paint and it will eventually dry on the paint, it will always be water reactive. So I'm going to go back in with my water bottle and I'm going to spray with my distress sprayer, again with those drops. I want to add some different drips, different drops, right? I'm not misting this. Go in with a paper towel again. It could be the same, it could be a different one. I already don't even know where that other one went. And I'm just going to start lifting this up. And this is where the magic happens, because this is where you start seeing totally different layers of patina, right? We can see some of that blue and green that's covered with the ink and some that we just took off with water. I mean, seriously, yum. And now you can see, when you see that little bit of twisted citron popping through or that little spot of peacock feather coming through, now you can see the importance of that background not being the same color. Right? Not having all your paints mixed. You could totally do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But my point is that base layer, don't get so caught up in your head about creating this perfect, beautiful blend, because the more random it is, to me, the more authentic your eroded metallic looks, because you get those surprises of color, that stuff that's just there. And that ink layer, to me, is everything, because it even changes the tone of the metallic, right? Because before we added any ink, our bronze was bronze, our blue was blue, our green was green. But now you can see that where the light hits it, we're getting little bits of that bronze, which looks coppery. We're also seeing that brown over the top of it. And even through that patina, same thing. Very cool. And what I love about this technique is you can do it on anything. This is a tag. We could do eroded metallic on a piece of plastic. We could do eroded metallic on a piece of wood. we could do Eroded metallic on a piece of fabric. It would work the same way because it's paint on paint with ink. So knowing what we know, there's nothing wrong with that. And you can just see that that technique just depends on your color. So here underneath I did black and red is my core colors of paint with that wonderful pewter. I love that. Super industrial. I love it. It looks kind of like torched iron, right? This one, I did more greens underneath, a little cracked pistachio. Down here is some hickory smokes. I wanted some grays. And then that's where you have the brass. And all of these, same idea, ink over the top. And you don't have to do brown. You could do whatever ink colors are going to work with your technique, right? Pretty cool. All right, there you go. You must show on wood. No, I don't. You need to show on wood. I showed you the technique. Now you do you. That's what this is all about, because it is very, very cool to just learn the technique and do it the way, like I said at the very beginning, do it the way that you want to do this. So would it work on canvas? Yes, because canvas is fabric, so it would work exactly the same way, right? Okay, that is Eroded metallic. I do like that. Really fun. Okay, so speaking of fabric, let's just do a quick fabric demo. And we'll talk about some collage. Now you can do whatever fabric, whether that's canvas or whether that's a fabric journal. I know Susie, she does amazing fabric journals if you don't follow her. Is Susie watching? I thought I saw her at the very beginning. Maybe she's still watching, but if she is, she can kind of just announce her blog. But journals are very cool. Junk journals, and everyone has a different approach to junk journals. I know Stacy did a journal as well, this last ideology release. But a lot of people, when they learn things, and again, I even answer that during the chat, you'll see a technique and you'll hear, oh, does it work on fabric? Yeah, it works on fabric. And then you're like, well, can I use it on this? Okay, well, is that fabric? Then yes, then it works on fabric, right? Or it works on wood. Oh, could I do it on a wood frame? Okay, but wood is wood. So it could be a frame. It could be your coffee table. It could be your wall. It is what it is. And I think as makers, sometimes we're more caught up with the actual element and we forget about the substrate, right? So think about that when you're doing work. A substrate is just the type of material, whether that's in the shape of a book or a frame or a canvas or any of that. It's really important to try a technique on the kind of mediums you use, because there are a lot of people that do junk journals. There are a lot of people that do art journals. There are a lot of people that do home decor, and all the same rules apply. When you start out with a medium, and I'm going to go back to someone that asked about canvas, you know, if you're familiar with canvas, that not all canvas is created equal, right? Some is just going to be a raw, almost like a duck cloth canvas. Some are going to be primed canvas. Well, you know from using those that those substrates are going to react slightly different. So my advice is, whenever you're trying something, even if you know the technique, like Eroded metallic, try it on a part of that substrate just to make sure that you're familiar with drying time, how it absorbs, all sorts of things, okay? That's really important. Would the fabric be washable? Distress paint is permanent when dry. So hopefully that would answer your question. Permanent when dry. So if you washed it, this would be permanent when dry. So yes, and it doesn't change the hand of that because distress paint has no fillers. And so when working on fabric, I want to talk about some different ways that we can apply paint. And I'm just going to use the Ideology Fabric Journal just as a test substrate, but you can use whatever you wanted to do. So if you're stamping on t-shirts, if you're doing jeans, if you're doing aprons, it is washable, but it must be dry. It does not need a fabric medium. But if you do not let this dry, then it's going to wash right out. So for example, if you got it on your clothes while you're creating, definitely clean it up while it's wet. Otherwise, art clothes, right? You're right, and it doesn't get crusty. You're absolutely right, Janet. That's the best part. So let's just talk about how we paint on this substrate. I'm gonna just go in with a little bit of campfire. We'll start with that, because this is just a, where did it go? I think I knocked it over. Oh, here it is. I grabbed barn door by mistake, but I really want campfire. Just to show kind of the visibility of color, right? So we're gonna just drip that down. Now, if you go on to dry fabric with paint, it's no different than going on dry paper with paint, right? Remember we talked about that if the surface is dry, that medium is going to want to absorb into that substrate. Can you still blend it with water? Yes. Yeah, if you spray it with water, you're going to get that paint to wick just like we did on paper. See, no different. And when I talk about it works on the same, it's no different when you're working with it. So knowing what you know, you just apply it to that new substrate. But let's say we want that paint to move right away. We didn't want to have to worry about that dark area. Okay, well then we know that we could start with a damp area, right? We could start with a wet bit of fabric. Let me go in and find, I swear, I start with something and then I put it somewhere else. We're going to take a water brush, and let's say we just pick up some color. Now if we go in, we have full control, almost like watercolor on fabric, right? Because our fabric was wet to start, and not soaking wet, not sitting in the sink wet, just misted. And now taking that wet brush, I'm able to continue to react that paint onto my fabric. I can continue to watercolor and watercolor and watercolor it out until I'm happy with the result. And once this dries, it is permanent. So it is like permanent watercolor, if you will, because it is a water reactive paint. So everything we just did, you just apply it to the substrate that works for you. And here's what's really cool about that. Yes, Dina's paint is also permanent. Yes, just going to be a different viscosity when it comes to watercolor. But yes, acrylic paint, most acrylic paints are permanent. It's just about remembering the water reactive properties and the ability to kind of wick and work out that color. And you can heat set this with a heat tool or an iron or anything like that. Okay, so what we can do also is add some collage elements. Now, collage paper, this is from Ideology. This is a very thin, very sheer paper, right? It's a wonderful paper. It's thinner than tissue paper because it can actually go right into a fabric substrate and still see the texture of the fabric. The cover, the little sticker that's on the cover of this fabric journal, that print right there, that's done with collage paper, right? So you can just take a print of this and goes right onto fabric. And let me just show you how that works and we'll get into some color. So I'm just gonna tear some of this off. This is just kind of my, see, it's like a demo book, I suppose. What we're going to use for this is we're going to take some collage medium. Mari, would you mind grabbing a collage brush for me out of that upper left drawer, because I use that other one for paint. One of the things that's important when you're working with, oh yeah, that'll totally, no, that's is there a smaller one? Can you grab the smaller one? Thanks. This is a big guy. This is great for canvas, and you can see the opening of that brush. See, now you can see it dry. Collage medium brushes have that open channel, and that's what picks up the glue. There we go. I used the medium one before. Here's the small one, but yeah, I like to work with Distress Collage Medium. Okay, it's matte. This is just a matte finish, and I learned this trick from Paula Cini, right? She did some stuff on fabric. So I'm just going to show you how this works. Just going to show you. We're going to put some collage medium down onto that fabric substrate. You want to make sure that you have enough of that on there. You can take any part of that paper, right? I'm just going to tear a little bit for now, just so you can see it. We're going to place this down. We're going to take more collage medium, and you're just going to work this into that fabric. And that's even like the brush allows me to kind of pounce, almost stipple that paper into our surface. And as long as you have wet collage medium underneath, this is now going to fuse itself to the fabric, okay? So if you don't have anything underneath, it's not going to, there's nothing that it can stick to. So you can kind of let this dry, you can tear off the rest, you can kind of go and do whatever you want with this. But let me just show you how this looks. Get rid of that paint when it dries. I'm going to dry this with a heat tool. So by starting with a layer of collage medium in your fabric, then you put the collage paper, and then you put collage medium over the top, and you work that paper into the weave of the fabric. Okay, we're going to just show you how cool this looks. It will look just like printed fabric. Do you have to heat set this? No, you do not. This could air dry, but I just want to show you, just for the sake of the demo, what you end up with. So take a look at that. Can you still see the texture, that weave of the fabric through the collage? That's what's really cool. And the paper, I mean, the fabric still pliable, still flexible, even with that collage medium. All right, so that's what's really cool. So this could air dry. You could do whatever you want with this. Now, if you're working with it, you want to remember that this was still wet on the back, but if you're going to work that collage medium through, you kind of want to open up the page so you're not having the glue go through the fabric and adhere to the next page. Kind of keep that in mind. All right, let's do another page. Let's clean this up and let's show you something else of how we can color. A couple things about collage paper. different ones that are in the line, and several of them have retired already. But there's several different printed ones. We used to have quite a bit, and this is totally different than tissue wrap. When we had tissue wrap before, that was kind of a washi paper that was much thicker. This is like a very thin, well, just thin tissue. But what's cool about it is you can see is it doesn't deteriorate when you use collage medium, but it will with water. So I'll show you what I mean. You can get some that are printed, and we just released a new one. So there's a beautiful botanical one. This is a new one. This is I love this one. The bugs, a little entomology one. Take a look at this one, okay? It's got cool little insects, and maybe that's not your thing, but I certainly love it. I think it's really, really beautiful. If you're into flowers, there's a wonderful florally one that you can put on there that we can go in and paint and color flowers. So I do love it. I love all the different looks. Now, one thing that is important to know about these, take this one out. The cool thing about having black and white is this is going to be like a coloring book, okay? So let's just take this, just going to rip this off. Could you use scissors? Yes. Paper cutter? Yes. Whatever you want for this. But let's just say we want to put a flower. Let me move this out of the way so you're only looking at this. Let's say we wanted to put, let me put these back. My demo's getting a little out of hand, Mario. There we go. Perfect. No, I just want to make sure I stay kind of in camera range. There we are. All right. So let's say we wanted to just have a flower, this flower coming into our piece of fabric. And again, this could have been a canvas, this could have been wood, this could be whatever. Although this looks white, this is going to become translucent when you add collage medium. So the white just kind of dissolves. Because remember this paper, how now you can see the cream color of that book? Any of the white paper on collage paper becomes translucent or transparent. So if this was already a color, this would show through. So we have the ability to add this to an inked or painted fabric or on top of it. So if I want this flower, here's the thing I love about this particular paper. I can take a wet brush. So I'll normally squeeze out some water just to get a drip from my water brush. And then I'll paint some water onto this paper. And I'm kind of painting around this image. And then it's just going to allow me to pull this paper apart. And the brush itself is what's going to act almost like your scissors. So you don't have to go in and fussy cut this. You just go around it with a wet paintbrush. And what's interesting is that you can see that this paper just kind of dissolves with water. And you would think that, oh my gosh, then when I go over it with collage medium, wouldn't the paper just kind of dissolve? If you've ever done like decoupage with a napkin, you know just what I mean, that you start putting glue over a napkin and the napkin just turns into muck, but it doesn't. So look at that beautiful frayed edge we were able to get just with water. Doesn't have to be a water brush, but that's self-feeding. Paintbrush and water. And that allows us to go in and sculpt any kind of layers that we might want. So maybe I want some of these leaves and text. So I just do the paint and you just kind of pull it apart. Can you go in and cut it? Sure. But what I like about this is I want those feathered kind of particles from the paper, right? That's really what I want. Can you see that? That's the look I'm going for, because that's what's going to kind of smooth out that transition into the fabric just quite a bit better, I think. I think it's really good. So I'm just going to take some collage medium, going to paint that down. Now in a perfect world, I would be doing this over here because any of the glue is just easier to clean up off the mat. But just for the sake of the demo, I'm going to just work right in the center of the camera so you could see it. So again, just putting down some collage medium. I want to make sure that my area is going to be enough. Collage medium is going to dry completely matte, completely flexible, so no need to freak your freak. We just want to get some of that down there. And let's push this off to the side. Excellent. A little bit more. And now we're just going to put that right over the top. And again, the reason I'm doing the little pouncing is because I want that, one, I want to get rid of any of the air bubbles, but two, I want that to really pick up the texture, the weave of this journal. I mean, we chose this kind of fabric for this book because of its texture. So if you had a smooth canvas, you could totally do that. All right. Now, take a look at that. Just seriously, see the edge is just gone. The print gone. It's like you stamped on fabric, but you didn't have to. You were able to use collage paper. There you go. Now you can see the texture. See what I mean? The importance of that paper becoming so thin. That's the best part. I'm going to go in with some more. Again, just working that in. And I'm going to put this over the top of that. I want that just to kind of work itself right over the other one. It's going to go back in with some collage medium. Again, just work that into the paper. Work that over the top. Off to the side. You can kind of hear that little pouncing. And there we go. So this, when I'm working, I like to just wrap this in a baby wipe until I'm finished, because I don't want my brush to have a lot of water on it, because otherwise it's just going to just start to dissolve the paper. But you can see that even overlapping, you can start collaging your images. You can put one image over the next and off you go. All right. So let me just clean this part up real quick. We're going to dry this real quick. I'm going to clean off that collage medium while it's wet off of my glass with a baby wipe. If it dries, hand sanitizer will take it right off. Okay, let's dry this and we'll get into some paint. And the reason I'm showing you this, because you're like, well, hold on, why aren't you, where's the paint coming in? Because a lot of times people want to color on fabric. They want to stamp and paint. And you could stamp on fabric, but if you stamp on fabric, it's a challenge, because a rubber stamp or a clear stamp really is going to be kind of challenged. Can you please make this permanent? I just saw that. It's like, it is permanent. The collage medium is waterproof. The paint also waterproof. There we go. So I'm just going to dry this. And could you set this aside to dry? Absolutely. Absolutely. So this collage medium, permanent, distress paint, permanent. Okay, there we go. Nice. So what can we do to this? Well, we can go in with our wet brush and we can go around this and we can dissolve the edge of the book if we want. All right, we can take that, or we can just take our scissor and trim this off. You could have cleaned it up before, and there's a lot of ways that we can fray this off the edge of a book. It just depends on the look that you want, right? If you want that to have that fabric-y look, well then that's why I'm going in with a wet brush and just kind of pulling this away so it doesn't look like I went in and trimmed this off. I mean, you notice on this fabric journal, it has those frayed edges just because, well, that was just a preference that I had. But yeah, you could finish this, you could sew it, you could cut this, but just taking some water and pulling that off. I mean, look at how cool and organic that edge is. Oh, look at how that image just, come on. Okay, so next, we're going to color. And coloring's super simple. If I'm going to color, if I'm just going to do some paints, can you work on your nonstick mat? Yes, but you can also peel this off to reveal the palette underneath. I do like the palette. I like the palette if I'm just going to do some different colors, because I can put a drop of paint onto that glass. I can see the color. The color is definitely more vivid, more vibrant, and after all, that's what it's there for. And I know there's some makers, I certainly don't want to use the term lazy, because I find myself doing it, but it's like there's many things that we can't be bothered with as makers, right? Where you're like, I don't want to be bothered. But then you realize, well, wait a minute, it was there to make what I was doing easier, right? So there's a lot of things when it comes to creating. Don't sacrifice the whole thing of not wanting to be bothered if it's going to make your creative process easier. Now, if you find it easier just to go in and do this right on the mat, go for it. But I think that's really, really important. All right, I just saw a comment about collage paper being discontinued. So let me address that. Tissue wrap is discontinued. Collage paper is not, but this one is. This is plain collage paper. Now, there are retailers that still have this in stock, but plain collage paper discontinued because, well, we try to bring plain out every time and it just doesn't sell. And it's very sad that it doesn't sell, because it is one of the most versatile ones, because this is just a plain version of what was just there. So you could, if you had a laser printer, you could tape this down to a piece of regular copy paper, run it through a laser printer, print on it, and you can make your own collage paper. If you have any kind of rubber stamps and you stamp with archival ink, because we already learned early in the demo that archival is waterproof and permanent, you could stamp on here and make your own collage paper. But this one is discontinued. It is not coming back. It will never come back. It will not be brought back. We fought the fight for so long to try to keep it around, but it is discontinued. So, but I know it's still available at at certain retailers. So if you find it and you like it, well, it's your one chance to buy, because it oh, cool. So Simon has it. Yeah, it just won't be coming back. And we try. I mean, I say this really every time I demo stuff. Like, I don't control a life cycle of a product. You do. That's the truth. I don't get to say to the brands like, no, it's got to stay. I try. You know, I'm like, oh, hey guys, can we keep it just a little longer? I think it's going to do this, or I think it's going to do that. But none of that really, that's impactful, because sales are sales, and it's a tough one, because, you know, if you look at plain collage paper and you look at the white roll, you're like, what would I do with it? It's just white paper. I could just use, you know, something from, I don't know, at Christmas, gift wrap. It's different than that tissue paper, because if you've tried to collage with white tissue paper, when it dries, it's white again. I mean, if you look at it, it's white again. This is not. This is translucent, and that's the big difference. It has to do with what it's made of. So it may feel the same, right? It may feel that crispy, crunchy. It may look the same, but ultimately there's more white fibers in that kind of paper. And again, it's what works for you. So we have a palette, paint, we have a water brush. So now we can just go in and pick up our paint and just watercolor over the top of this. Now, when I say watercolor, what you have to remember is that you are working with an opaque medium. So there's a couple of ways to get around this, and I'll tell you this. If you're pretty good at like figuring out where things are going to go, or where things are going to end up, you could have technically painted this fabric first. And by painting the fabric first, you would have the flexibility of adding really intense color. But now you can see I'm kind of going with my finger each time, dabbing it off. If you put too much color down, you could essentially cover that collage paper, because we're watercoloring with an opaque medium. So it's kind of a give and take on this one, that if you are going to watercolor, just make sure that you have water in there and you're kind of blending it out, because you want to be able to see that design. I'm not the best colorer. I never claimed to be, but you get the idea. I never like to do a lot of coloring, because I'm not patient enough for that. But I like to show that if that's you, that you have such a great ability to utilize collage elements or distress paint on fabric. And if you just want to freehand it, if you don't need collage paper or a stamped image and you just want to go for it and just add your own colors, then go for it. Really, do you. If you've got that skill level, man, celebrate it. Do that. I just think that, you know, seeing tools like this used in maybe a way that we haven't worked with before, that's a benefit of paint. We have now a medium. You know, I did see some comments of like, I wish you can make this permanent. I'm just guessing that they probably just joined us, but that's the thing. Distress paint being permanent, that's why it was important to have it in the line, which I was explaining at the very beginning of the live, that there's different mediums as designers that we bring into our line for different things. It doesn't necessarily mean it's the same reason another designer would have that medium in their line, right? So you could just see here, just the flexibility, the versatility of paint. I can just add some water here. And if I want, I can just dab some water in areas. While this paint is wet, that's what I'm doing. And I'm just going in with a paper towel and just lifting some of that off, because I want more of a mottled background. But there you go, right? So that's going to be permanent. If this was on an apron, it would be totally washable. It would be all of that. So if you wanted to go in and paint, yeah, I just saw a comment, paint the back of the paper. Yes, if you can do reverse painting, you could paint on the back of collage paper before you put it down. And you're right, the paint would be waterproof. So that would be a great way to do it. Just going to show like the back of it. Yeah, I think you'd be able to see it. So you could definitely do that. Just some really great kind of creative ways that we can incorporate collage elements and paint on another substrate, whether that's fabric, whether that's wood, whether that's clothing. It's just pretty cool. And just remember, as long as you're playing around with water while this paint is wet, you can do your lifting. You can do, you know, that modeling, manipulating. But once it's dry, done. You're not going to be able to go in and lift that off anymore. So just kind of a fun way that we can add those collage elements. And I've shared a very similar thing when it comes to using stamped images on cardstock. Let me just look at the time. Not bad. Not bad. Let me just show this. and then we will wrap it up. Okay, Mario, you're all right? You're good with that? Okay, let me get some stuff out of the way. Just because, you know, sometimes one technique leads into the next, and if you see it, you may not kind of recognize the significance or the importance of a technique. And I shared this over the holiday season, Christmas, and I know a lot of makers were rocking it. Zoe Hillman, she was just totally rocking this as well when it comes to painting and layering. So I want to share working with paints and stamped images, especially on paper like craft, right? This is the heavyweight craft. It could be any kind of craft paper, or it could be something dark. It's totally fine. But the beauty of this is using a stamped image and creating layers. Now, this could be done with flowers. This could be done, these are fun, with blueprints, right? Because the blueprint would absolutely work. It could be done with any kind of stamp that's going to have some open space that we want to add color to, right? So let's just take a stamp. For this one, you are going to need, in my opinion, some type of stamping tool, whatever stamping tool you have, because we're going to need to repeat the stamping process. So I'm just going to take craft paper, place my magnets. I like to keep them in opposite corners, prize fighters. If you want, you can do sticky grid or whatever is going to work depending on the tool that you have. I'll just use a stamped image. So maybe it's going to be this guy. Maybe he's going to have an idea. I have no idea. That light bulb seems awfully big for him, but hey, he is the proprietor of ideas. Okay, there we go. There's our whole concept right now, is what I'm going to do on this craft. And I'm just going to place that down. Let me just make sure. Yep, rubber side. Perfect. Place that down, pick that up. So what I'm going to do is stamp. It's always funny. It's like I put one thing over the next thing whenever I'm working with it. It's true Tim style. And I'm going to ink this up just with archival. We want this to be permanent, our first layer to be permanent, super important. Okay, I do love these stamps. I like this because, I don't know, it's really just about like celebrating your creative style. So proprietor of ideas works for me. Now, one of the things that's important, whatever tool again that you're working with, is remembering like registration. So this happened to just be in the corner. Okay, so now I have a foundation, a background. You see that? Perfect. Then I'm going to take some paint after I just cleaned up my palette. So I'm not going to do much this time. Let's just take some colors. We'll do a little antique linen. See, I cleaned up my palette just too early. Too rushed to finish this up. Ooh, I want to use fossilized amber. That's a great color. Yeah, I could just, even though I'm not good at coloring, it doesn't stop me from trying. And that's the thing to always remember as a maker. Just because you're not good at something, don't be afraid to do it. As long as you have fun doing it. I have fun painting. I just wish I was better at painting. Okay, there's a little green, and I don't know. Maybe he'll be, make his tie blue, right? Okay, there we go. There's a little crusty in there. Good, okay. So what I'm going to do is take a water brush, paper towel, pick up some color, and this time I'm going to just paint right over the top of this. And what's weird is that when you're doing it, you're like painting over the image because it's an opaque medium. And this could be any, I don't know, any tone, any look that you want to give your background, right? Let me just go in here. All right, shade that out. Then I'll take a little bit of green. I'm going to go right over that. So I'm actually painting over the stamp design. But the only place I'm worrying about getting color is where my stamp design opens up. So in other words, where it's solid on the edges, don't care. Okay? Because that's not going to be impacted by this particular technique. So for example, on his tie, I'm just going to go into the open areas. But again, you do you. If you feel better about covering the whole thing, and if you don't want to even do this with wet paint, you know, maybe you want to go in and just do this with dry paint, you absolutely can. Okay, I'm just showing you quickly. That's why I chose, you know, some really kind of simple images to color that we can go in and we can add this. If I want to just take a little bit, Another color on the inside, we can blend that color out. And we could even do, hey, we can do a little metallic as well. Okay. All right. A little metallic. We'll go in. Metallic's pretty fluid stuff, but that doesn't stop me from using it. Okay. Excellent. Now for this, let's see. I'm going to just take a little frayed burlap. Okay, I want to just create a little shadow. I think I have some yellow on there. There we go. A little shadow in there. Okay. Perfect. And totally on you, really, how you want to shade the image or not. Okay, so once that's done, we're going to dry it. We need to make sure this is dry, if possible. Perfect. Excellent. Then we're going to take our image again. Now for this, I know I'm done with my palette because we're wrapping up the demo. This is how it is every time I do it. Where we try to clean up, sometimes it backfires. Okay. Excellent. So what we're going to do, you can see at this point, we've painted and it covered up the image. So with our piece in the same spot, we're going to go back in. We're going to ink that up a second time. I'll just do the text just because. And then we'll go in and we'll stamp it again. And you could do this really indefinitely, as many times as you need to. But here's the cool part of what we just did, right? So we were able to create that effect, whether that's the metallic in the light bulb, whether that's just the suit, and we can still go over this and ink and all that, but see just a little bit of shading. I just think what's nice about this is that you stamped to create your outline, you painted, and this is on craft paper, right? So any kind of inked background. Now, both of these things, what we stamped in and what we colored in, are waterproof mediums because we colored with paint, right? Could you do something like this with oxide? Possibly. Yeah, you could do that, but now it's waterproof, so I can still do my background. Meaning I could still go in with, dry this, make sure this is dry, because it's important to understand like why a medium, because you're like, well, couldn't we, you know, we've seen that oxides are going to be waterproof. Sure, but the nice thing about this now is I can take a blending brush, because I want this to just be a little bit lighter. Okay, get some walnut stain going on there. And I'm just going to go over that area in the center. Just with my ink, right? The cool thing about a blending brush, it doesn't matter where you start. It's not going to give you harsh edges, but also just really allows me to kind of fade this out. Okay, so now we've just kind of blended over the top of that, but my color remains. And remember from the tag we did, I don't even remember when, but that was our resist tag, that the paint is still a resist. So if I just take a little damp paper towel, I can go back just over those painted areas, because knowing what we know about distress paint is it's going to lift the ink only, and now my colors are bright again, right? So you totally have options when it comes to working with this, how you want to create your backgrounds, knowing what we know about these different mediums. And that's the benefit of learning about them. You know, paint might not be your thing. You might be like, yep, I saw it, I got it, but I'm really an ink person. But it's certainly very cool to see what you can do with it, because whether we're stamping and coloring on cardstock, whether we're able to utilize it on fabric, there's so many different kind of techniques we can do. I mean, gosh, there's a bazillion backgrounds. Let's take a look at those first ones before we flip this around. Look at the intensity of that one that we let dry, right? Whew, look at that color, right? Cool, cool background. And it still has a little way to go, But I mean, see how those colors just totally become vivid, and again, permanent, waterproof. But all these other backgrounds, right? Look at that one. Love how that paint completely just dry and permanent on there. Yummy. Industrial, so beautiful. And again, permanent, dry. So even on metallic, all those little brush strokes are going to be dry. Using resist spray to be able to layer over the top of it. There's our stamped resist. There's just so many different ways that we can incorporate just art mediums into whatever it is that we want to do. I think that's the important thing to remember. Look, I was kind of channeling a lot of greens and yellows and all sorts of things. So let's talk about backgrounds and what we can do. Because as I mentioned, 4 weeks of learning about different distress mediums, we've covered all of the main mediums. But there's things to keep in mind, because people go, well, wait a minute, what do you do with all these tags? Why do you do tags? To me, tag is a piece of paper. This is no different than this. It's just a convenient shape that I can do backgrounds on. But here's some things to keep in mind. When you have a tag, right? So maybe it was this one, and you have dies, die cut your tags. Who cares that it's a tag? It's just a piece of paper. Whoops. But this is going to give me, well, look at these. Look at these beauties. Look at those great die cuts. Now, where would you create paper like that? I doubt you would die cut this out of white and then spend the time to create these ink blends for your card. But because you just have backgrounds and you're like, oh, now I want to die cut stuff, you get to die cut things that are unique. And I was able to ink the edges with this without worrying about the color because this was done in paint. And that created something over the top of that. Maybe you had little scraps, because I love keeping scraps. So this was scrap of another eroded metallic tag that I did. Well, take a look at how great this looks with an impresslet, right? So now we have just a piece of paper. It was just a tag, but now we created this patina oxidized impresslet that could go on something that looks like patinaed copper, but it's a piece of paper, right? Very cool to utilize that. So whether you're doing regular dies or impresslets. Now, what about something dimensional, right? So wood grain, people go, what do you do with wood grain paper? I like to make things look like they're made out of wood that maybe they aren't, right? So take a look at this heart, right? This faceted heart looks like a block of wood. Looks like it was done out of a piece of wood, but it was simply taking this die, which you may have seen people do out of metallic or all sorts of things, and you just cut it out of a piece of wood grain that you made, and now you have something. You have something that, let's say we're gonna put this on a frame or a card, and we have all these other die cut pieces that we did when we were doing the shaping kit, right? Maybe you take those elements and zippity-doo, Mother's Day card, right? Or whatever. Maybe that's just ginormous. Maybe that's all you need to do, add an element. So having these pieces done, having that background done, that foundation done, is always going to give you elements to grab and choose from to create other makes. And I think that that's what I really love about working with different substrates, is that you can create whatever it is that inspires you to create. Let's say you're not a creator. Let's say you really just want to kind of dabble in technique and you don't want to worry about what to do with them. One tip that I have, especially if you followed this series for the entire month about learning the different mediums and you've created many tags, one thing to do, and I've taught this, this was a class, I believe I taught this in the UK, it's Creative Chemistry Live, and that is every technique that we did, right? Whether this was a distress ink background, we stamped with the same images, fairly same location. So like here's that dragonfly on a distress ink. Now the class came with like instructions on how to do each technique. But then like this was a microglaze resist, same stamp. This was watercoloring with oxide, same stamp. This was doing that crayon technique that we did in the first week, stamp. This was watercoloring with crayons and doing a background, same. This was doing stencils, right? Doing that monoprint with the sprays, same. Ooh, look at that, paint resist, like what I just shared with you, same. We'll just keep going. Oh, look at that, our paint marble technique, same. And you could write down, I mean, you're not gonna have labels, but you can write down the steps when you watch the video, eroded metallic. And the reason I suggest this, these happen to be alcohol ink, is that if you do this, when you go back to reference this, you're not captivated by the image choice that you did. They're finished, so your eye sees it as something pretty because it's whatever stamp you happen to have. It doesn't have to be the dragonfly, but by utilizing the same stamps in a swatch book, you as the maker will identify the technique or the background versus the image. Because I believe stamped images really impact the background, right? You can choose the right stamp or the right stencil to change everything, right? The embossing folder used for this technique gave it a completely different look than this. Some people would be like, ooh, grungy, industrial, gross. Then you change it and you're like, ooh, wow, pretty. Same technique, but it's just about the eye. So if you have a stamp that you like and you do this on all of your backgrounds and you jot down notes as to how it was done, this is going to allow you to go, okay, wow, that was that oxide technique, because you're not paying attention to, ooh, I really love that rose stamp or whatever it is. I would suggest that that's another great way that you can utilize all of the things that you've learned and remember them, right? So that's just a little bit of advice, right, that I wanted to give.